May not be for the reasons that he
No, he's there.
but he's there.
That's where you land when you stop being a high-flying government official. The place that you land is where everybody else is. This public space. So we welcome him.
Right. So there's been a number of public appointments, new appointments. There's, of course, the reshuffle means that some people will move from one place to another. But of course, the big question is, to whom now do we send pictures of the locusts?
Of the locusts.
Rachel Omama is in Foreign Affairs. Cicely Karaoke, of course, moved from the Ministry of Health to Water, Sanitation and Irrigation. Monica Juma moved to Defense. Peter Munya now is the one that you will send these pictures to.
His former constituents of Meru will immediately send him, inundate his photo with his phone with photos.
Simon Cheluga is the now Labour Cabinet Secretary, and Ukuri Atani now, of course, confirmed as National Treasury and Planning CS.
This is why we say he only has one job.
One job now.
Ukuri Atani only has one job.
Right.
So Defense and Foreign Affairs is a swap. Remember, Monica Juma used to be a PS for Defense, so she's basically just gone back there now as the boss, and a lady who was formerly an ambassador has gone to be the boss of the other ambassadors.
So,
what do you think informed that decision, City? Or many other decisions? Okay, but let's start with this one.
I don't know. From what I have heard, I don't know okay, let me start by saying that what you said is correct. Rachel Omamo was our ambassador. I think it was to France.
To France,
places,
yes.
But also, if I'm not wrong, she was the first lady to actually be chair of the LSK.
Yes.
If I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
And if I'm not wrong, she has probably a string of other achievements behind her.
You're
Being
not
the
wrong this one.
First Lady Cabinet Secretary for Defense.
Yes.
In the region.
Yes. Now, what I do know about Monica Juma, she also lays claim to some very fine credentials. Okay. From what, again, I have heard, she's not just no nonsense. She is a stickler, not just for the rule of law, but for procedure and for doing things the way they should.
The book.
To book.
Yes.
To book.
Every time I've read some bad press about her and asked those who perhaps know more than I do, it's come out that no, she will not be moved easily about with political decisions and things that people want to make if they do not follow what it is that is required. Now, this may be partly part of the reason why she has been put in defense, because I'm not saying that Rachel Omamo is indecisive. I am simply saying that Monica Juma's credentials when it comes to fighting
she's
things...
not diplomatic.
Yes, she'll fight things head on.
She's not having a conversation.
Yes.
She's
Two things that are clear. She's combative, overtly so. Okay, Rachel may very well be combative, but that side of hers has never really come out. But Monica Juma's has. Now, so essentially, she's our war minister.
Right.
Voila.
Right now.
That
Yes,
is
she
it.
is. And if you look at some of the problems that we've had with the incursions of Al-Shabaab and what have you,
Yep.
it may be possible that this is what was being considered. But I would then ask, who is the PS defense?
I don't remember. I remember there was...
Because it's important to find out who the PS defense is.
I will tell you shortly as we continue
Yes.
the conversation.
So you asked me why I think. That is why I think.
One thing also stands out, though. The fact is that the two ladies both sit on the National Security Council. And so just swapping them ensures that the National Security Council is not being reconstituted.
Yes.
So it has played well in terms of that. So we're talking about PS for Defense. Defense is Mr. Mohammed Ibrahim, CBS.
Okay.
He's the Principal Secretary for Defense.
Good.
I'm waiting to see what Francis Atwoli is going to say about this.
About these
Remember last year, Francis Atwoli came back from, was it Tokyo, where the president had gone in the TICAD meetings?
All right, Japan, yes.
And he said, Monica Juma should be fired.
Of course, she wasn't fired.
Yeah, she has embarrassed our president in terms of how our president, excuse me, the sitting arrangements and all. apparently, the president was supposed to have sat somewhere, and this is where he sat, and how the president was treated.
Protocol issue.
Basically, it was a protocol mismanagement.
Yeah, it happens.
According to Atwoli, it should not. And now
it happens.
What was the track record prior to that?
That it had not happened in a long time.
Yes, it had happened. And was she the holder of that particular office then? She was. So a mistake when prior to that, whatever she has been doing was flawless and without error. So one error, you want to sack someone because of one error.
And something like a protocol issue which doesn't put a dent in how the office is run.
It's resolved. By the way, a protocol error.
In minutes.
It's resolved.
In minutes.
No, not the next day. Almost immediately.
The issues that are emerging out of that is that the protocol error was actually coming out because of what you just described. Monica's combativeness, Monica's sticking to the book, and all those kind of manners. So it was mismanaged at the top level. And therefore, maybe it was some staff who decided to let it pass because the boss has said this is how it should be. Let it be. So it emerges that, oh no, the president is actually being mishandled.
How long had she been in that docket when that happened? I don't require a ready answer. There's a point I'm getting to. When I had a discussion with some friends of mine who were in the dream team, one of the things that they told me, the original dream team during the Moi era, was the people they worked with were often the biggest hurdle. Someone new comes in as the boss. The mid-level management who've been there forever, and some who I probably felt they could have done this job, they may not necessarily work to assist your tenure. They could actually sabotage you.
Yeah.
What is this strange thing about protocol and what needs to be done that was new here? Nothing.
It's SOPs.
Yes. And there are people who are in charge of those things. Not Monica Juma. There are people who are in charge of those things. So when someone says that she is to blame, yes, if you are the boss, the buck stops with you. But before the buck rolls, somebody has been pushing it along before it gets to you, isn't it? These people are not in the picture. So it tells you volumes. Such things are never cut and dry as they are made to sound. Yes. And there was something personal to it also.
There are things that have been happening at the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and they've come to head.
Yes,
to a
they
head.
have.
This is it. We'll wait and see what. I'm sure Francis Atwoli will have a comment on this particular move.
Let's wait and see. There's a lot, of course, to be discussed around that, even on this show today. But then also, I'm sure it's taking the country by storm for sure. And the next few days are going to see quite a number of discussions around that. Something, of course, we've talked about it every day for the last 10 days, possibly. However, Kenya now pays dearly for failure to act on locust warning. Yesterday, when I talked about this and we gave this little article that I had found, or rather this report that I had seen, it did seem like we're coming quite hard on the government. But listen to this now. They say forewarned is forearmed, but Kenya's Ministry of Agriculture, with the former CS of course, failed to arm the country against the locust invasion that is now threatening the nation's food security. Had Kenya acted on the early warning on a possible locust invasion by the Food and Agriculture Organization last month, it would have been much easier to control the pests at a lower cost and most probably using a biological method, according to an expert, Dr. Eston Mutitu, a principal forest entomologist at the Kenya Forestry Research Institute. But he now says the situation can no longer be controlled using biological methods. So even this that is being done the last couple of days is not going to work. Dun, 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 dun. Yep, it's not going to work, folks. So the efforts that are being made right now is not going to happen. We're not going to see until the locusts leave Kenya. That is when there will be relief or reprieve.
And they'll have to move.
When do locusts? When do they move? After they've eaten everything in sight, usually.
Basically, after they've breeded, after the breeding cycle has ended, that is when they now move.
And breeding cycles, do they leave the children behind?
Yes.
Do they leave the children behind, or do they go with the kids?
I don't know.
So they come in here, they lay their eggs, and as they eat, the eggs hatch.
Interestingly enough, once they lay, the females leave. The females leave, so the males stay around and they continue to feed. Interestingly enough, and then
so the females go to scout for new
territory,
new pasture,
basically. So the males stay around.
There's gender parity in this group.
There is
a well organized
group because they stay around basically eating until those eggs hatch. Once they hatch, then they all leave.
They carry the babies.
So these are involved species who have understood that you do the serious work yourself and leave the men to do the less serious work.
Like eating.
Like looking after children.
Yeah. And looking after the children. Eating and looking after the children. Now, and it sounds like a very long period of time, like months, but it's actually a cycle of 28 to 29 days that all of this happens.
Mm-hmm. So and there's an entire pattern. I saw that map of how they're coming from all the way from Somalia into Ethiopia, getting into Kenya, and then they're going to go into a bit of Western up to
they're
Turkana.
Already there.
Up to Turkana and
you know
then
what
into
happens
Uganda.
is people talk about it as though, you see, they wait for these really huge
swarms.
No.
The scouts are here.
Thank you. You've got it. They even have scouts.
They come and see where they know where the food is. So they leave. They say, okay,
guys,
folks, come this side.
There's plenty here.
So in the case of Kirinyaga, which has are they called the double-horned grasshoppers or something? So are those, like spies in camouflage? Us guys are harmless. You see, we are green. We're not brown.
Those who study
but they're sending messages
these particular
back.
creatures will, I'm going by what I've been reading, is that it's an evolutionary process for these so-called grasshoppers, because actually they are all grasshoppers, just for starters.
Yes.
To get to the point where they now form into these groups, these large armies that move around. They all start sedentary. They sort of like the green creatures that we see around. But the ones that you see are not green, brown, grayish. They are those who say that some of these species move over a period of time and then become these, what we are now looking at as predators, but the flying army that they have, okay? Others remain behind. They are the most...
they just hang out, no problem.
No problem. They're the people we see every day.
So all locusts are grasshoppers, but not all grasshoppers are locusts. It's like squares and rectangles.
All squares are rectangles, and not all rectangles are squares.
It's true. It's true. Remember how we talked about how you use your mathematics later? This is one of those.
All right. This is a situation with Kenya's biggest conversation. Taking a look at what happened between 10 a.m. yesterday and 6 a.m. this morning. Of course, we know the big news of the day is the cabinet changes and the government, the president's announcement on what he intends to do in the coming days. He said this is the agenda at the beginning of the year. So we'll be looking at that as we go along this show. So now we will take a look at the politics behind the reshuffle and the sacking of Cabinet Secretary Mwangi Kionjori. We'll also be looking at the entry of Mutahi Kagwe for in health, the promotion of Betty Maina in industrialization. Later in the show, we'll be looking at what the impact of a cabinet reshuffle is and should be to the country. We'll also be looking at, of course, getting views from our guest this morning, who is going to be the Senate Speaker, Kenneth Lusaka. He'll be joining us from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. And then, of course, the conversations continue. Good morning, 18 minutes past 6 o'clock.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice and fit.
Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Jameni, niambieni ni nani? Mimi niko na shamba na sio ndogo. Niambie ni nani mkulima ambaye anakuza Kenya hii mahindi ya shilingi milioni 200? Si ni ukora jameni? Si ni ukora? Mtu anavuka hapa kwa mpaka, anaingia Uganda, anatafuta mahindi, labda hata hatafuti, anakuja kumwaga. Mkulima ambaye ametoa jasho wa Kenya analaa njaa, watoto hawajasoma kwa sababu ya ukora ya wachache. Na ndipo nilisema, waziri wa kilimo Bwana Kionjori, tujue ya kwamba sasa mchezo umeisha. Tafuta hawa watu ambao wanakula mali ya wengine, utuletee tufunge, ama wewe mwenyewe utakuwa na shida katika hiyo shida mambo. Kwa sababu hatuwezi kuwa kila saa pesa inatolewa na inakulwa na wachache. Hii ni kodi ya Wakenya, iende kwa yule ambaye ametoa jasho.
So, Shida has come full circle. The warning bells were there a long time ago, like the CS himself said.
Not once. He was told,
twice. Stop paying these people. In fact, this was in 2018 when the president said this, and he repeated again later and said, stop paying people who are just brokers and middlemen. Pay directly to the farmers.
Right.
This is the issue of maize.
Right. Of course, and he said it in no uncertain terms. The responsibility of this lies on your shoulders. You know, you're joking around in terms of this, and we're talking about the very thing that Kenyans need to survive physiologically. But people need to eat, and here you are joking around with this thing.
Food.
And he gave a warning, and that warning that he gave became reality in the sense that, look, my friend, you will go, and that is exactly what has happened now.
You know. We in this very station, remember we've had heated debates on this matter of the president only speaks. And I've said, no, it doesn't actually work that way. You sometimes fail to understand because you are basing your opinion on other presidents and how they approached issues. You assume that when you have a president who seems to be a little patient and wants to give you time, you consider him weak and you consider him indecisive. It's a discussion we had here, and I said, no, I don't think so. Well, it looks like I have been proven right.
So this is a congratulatory moment.
This is it.
It's that particular moment
that was your hand
where you pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, this was it. Your hand facing backwards and stopping yourself.
Saying, City, well done. You got that one right.
Oh, great seer.
Congratulations.
But of significance, the handshake has also reared its head.
Yep. In this particular issue.
Oh, yes, it has. There's a gentleman by the name of Peter Odoyo.
Oh, wow, Peter.
Chief Administrative Secretary. This, once upon a time, an assistant minister.
Yeah.
Yes, the Ministry of Labour.
Yes, then there's Wavinya Ndeti, who's been Chief Administrative Secretary, Transport. She is a close ally of the ODM brigade.
Yeah.
Yes, so I see the handshake rearing its head.
In this yesterday's appointments.
Yes, because Peter Odoyo is a stalwart in that very same ODM brigade.
We can't run away from the fact that this sacking, rather, or relief of duties is twofold in the sense that, one, okay, let's just be honest, the guy just didn't do his job. Secondly, obviously, it has some political connotation.
He didn't do his job. It's just that the job he
did
was
it poorly.
Given initially.
He wasn't doing the job he was given.
Yes, he rewrote.
He did another job.
He rewrote his
job description. Right.
There's a politics of, like you're saying, the politics of Tanga as well.
Yes.
We've seen Mwangi Kiunjuri has actually been, aligning himself openly with the Tanga Brigade, sort of seeming to defy what the president is saying. Let's focus on development. One of the key of the Big Four agenda is food security. And food security falls squarely in this docket. And when the president says, let's stop politicking and go focus on development, and then you see the same CS is the one who's going around, attending political meetings and, having political conversations. Remember just the other day when the president was attending the burial of Charles Rubia. And the CS stood up and spoke, and he was talking about, Mr. President, when you make promises with the people, you've made promises with God. You need to honor those promises.
Okay.
Basically reminding him, remember, kuna kitu ulisema. And now don't go against this. Speaking like that openly. The president stood up, and he reacted to what Alice Wahome said. He did not react directly to what Mwangi Kiunjuri said. He chose to react in a different way.
And that reaction has reverberated through the entire country. It's interesting that you bring up the issue of the Big Four agenda, because if you look at that, the four that we look at, health, of course, food security, housing, and then manufacturing, two of those, the Big Four, we've had people who sit at the helm being moved. And it was clear that these are the two where we saw some serious issues with the rollout of the UHC and the impact that it's had in the country so far. Obviously, it seemed that, okay, Cicely Kariuki was not holding the day per se. And then here also with Mwangi Kiunjuri, and we've had, if you just want to look at the numbers, if you want to look at the docket itself over time, 5 years from 2019, 5 years, in 5 years, food prices had been at their worst in Kenya. Over time, we look at the security of food in the country, food security in the country, and we're looking at a percentage of 21%, over 100. So that Kenya was only food secure for only 1 in every 5 Kenyan could then say that I have sustainable food sources or resources. The rest we don't even know. We were not able to establish early warning systems had been established, but those systems then were not able to evaluate them, monitor them, and then use them for our benefit and act on them in this country. We saw famine, we saw floods, we saw landslides, and then now we saw locusts.
We have seen locusts.
Still with that, we were not able to act. Forewarned is forearmed. But then and then of course there was a sentiment that here you are with a docket that bears so much responsibility. Well, absolutely. That's the thing. And when you're put in that position, understanding then what is on your shoulders to be able to get it done is of high regard. And you should be able to then say, okay, well, buck down. Let's get this job done. It cannot be that time after time after time, you are the one that we continue to find issue with, number one. Number two, there's a scandal. It is you. People cannot be paid. It is you. Money was released. It is you giving an explanation as to why you didn't pay the farmers. What are we doing? What are we talking about? Definitely. In terms of this relief of duties, it was warranted. Actually, it was warranted.
If you actually
couldn't have come sooner.
I mean,
it should have come sooner.
If there's one group of people who are actually very responsible for the well-being of Kenyans, it's our farmers. They have been treated really very shoddily.
Very badly.
They were treated badly before, but when this gentleman who has been given an opportunity to pursue alternative interests, then their situation actually got worse. It wasn't bad. It just got worse. It just worsened and worsened and worsened and worsened and worsened.
Because if you listen to the president's speech yesterday, he was actually talking about issues that need to be, rejigged around the agricultural sector. Talking about tea and coffee, talking about milk and the potato farmers. All these things that he was talking about are things that should have been handled by the CS for agriculture.
By the time you have a plan to help revamp the sector, and to try and sort of like provide incentives and provide a cushion to the farmers.
Yep.
Something has gone really very wrong.
It has collapsed under the watch of somebody.
Yes, actually, good word, collapsed. Because if you look at consumer prices, they've more than doubled from the time President Uhuru came into power.
Literally since 2014.
Yes.
Yeah. A year after they came into power,
Yes.
2014 until 2019 saw the worst the country has ever experienced.
In its history.
In its history. And there's somebody who was sitting in that dock. I mean, it's okay if there was nobody there. And then you say, okay, we're trying to figure out our way. But there was someone there. Time and time again, your name has been called in terms of what it is that you were then supposed to do. It's unfortunate, especially now that when you want to look at it, of course, government does not act does not operate in isolation. There are PPPs that government works that they have that they're involved in. There are external forces that play a part. Interestingly enough, especially for agriculture, there is an entire UN agency whose sole mandate is to support government in agriculture. That's what they do.
Yep.
That's what their funding is for. It comes out of Rome every year. This is what it is for. And even with that, when we're not able to take the help that is being offered and say, okay, what can we do? How can we make it better?
And not just one, a couple of international organizations that are based here that actually support agriculture. But livestock research, insects and
forestry
and forest.
I mean,
we have
the list goes on and
on.
But when it comes to agriculture, what now exacerbates it and what adds salt to the wound, or pepper to the wound, is this: other people in that particular chain, like processors, have more than tripled some of their gains in terms of profit. So it's the farmer who actually suffers.
Yeah.
The processor benefits, the person who's at the other end benefits, but here
the middleman
benefits immensely. But this person who actually produces,
the one who tills the land,
that person, it's not just a question of not benefiting; it's almost a negative process for their energy and for their effort. Farmers have become poorer over time. Yes.
So this, I think, is very important because a lot of this took a political skew yesterday when we saw this sacking. Of course, there are many questions. Probably, Eric, we can talk about in a short bit. But I think it's very important to lay the foundation and say, look, what has been happening agriculturally in this country has gone to the dogs.
But the president also seems to have acquired something that perhaps one could say is an inheritance of sort. His late father spent a lot of time in Mombasa. I think he's figured out why his father used to spend so much
time in Mombasa.
He's seen the light.
He has understood.
He's among the first. He's among the first to see the sun rising. So it helps.
Yes.
He's up earlier than the rest of us. At 6:30, this is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We're taking a look at the president's speech yesterday and the moves that he made within the cabinet, and especially in the agricultural sector, the announcement that he made. And this morning we are saying, well, he has actually addressed the concerns that have been raised in Mount Kenya region, especially by farmers and the issues of agriculture, tea, milk. We'll be discussing those shortly, and also looking at the impact of having Mwangi Kionjori out of the cabinet. Good morning. Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Traffic.
Already this Wednesday morning, Waiyaki Way is promising to be a bit of a disaster. At about 6 o'clock, the traffic had already started building up. So if you're on that road, understand that we already have a traffic situation there. So you might want to leave early or wait until a little bit later to leave. Okay, Mombasa Road, the expressway, there's already traffic, as we have seen and heard. There's a slight build-up at the Gateway Mall on Mombasa Road, heading out. All right, we're on day 4 of the Kasarani Mwiki protests over poor roads. Residents are resilient, and that means that everybody's going to have to walk for at least a 5-kilometer stretch to get out to Thika Road. Let's take a look at other streets or other roads in the city. And right now, not so bad coming off Langata Road or Ngong Road. Industrial area is behaving very well right about now. Let's see what it looks like in about half an hour. But if you left early, you're in good stead. Let's see what happens in a short while. We'll let you know, of course, and keep you updated. Spice FM KE is our Twitter handle. Let us know if you're stuck somewhere and we can find an alternate route for you. Otherwise, give us a call on 0719 012 600. Of course, Wednesday, we want to keep you moving, folks.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Good morning. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. My name is Eric Latif. We have C.T. Muga. We have Nduoko. This show live streams, and the live streams are up this morning. Spice FM KE Facebook, at Spice FM KE on Twitter. We're on Spice FM KE YouTube and www.spicefm.co.ke. The president made some changes and shake-up in their cabinet yesterday, and that's what we're looking at. So out is CS Mwangi Kionjori from Agriculture. Of course, he had received a couple of warnings more than once from the president. But also we're looking at the Big Four agenda, for the president's Big Four agenda. Food security is one of them, and it falls squarely in the agriculture docket. The other one is industrialization, housing, and health. Health has also been affected in terms of Cecily Kariuki being moved and newly appointed CS being brought into health. This is Mutahi Kagwe, who's been nominated to the docket of health, has come in here. Is this an indication that the president does not feel like Cecily Kariuki managed the rollout of...
Yes.
You think so?
Yes.
Why?
The president, as well as many others in terms of Kenyans.
It was a successful rollout.
Of course, it was a successful rollout.
The pilot program.
The pilot program was rolled out successfully. Of course, there's several hitches
How many
that
pilot
experienced that
programs
should
that
not
have
have been
rolled out
experienced.
well?
Galana Kulalu.
That was not a pilot program. That was supposed to be the thing.
It was a pilot program.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't.
It was the pilot phase. Yes, the first.
Eric.
Okay, fine. Let's look at the
pilot phase.
Let's look at the pilot phase. The pilot phase was supposed to deliver 400,000 kilograms of maize in the first 3 months,
and it failed. That's what I'm saying.
It failed, but.
No.
You're asking about pilot that failed.
Yes.
That is one that failed even at the pilot stage. We didn't look at a failure at the UHC at the pilot stage. We looked at least certain things that were then put in until the point that now it's able to be rolled out to the remaining 44 counties in the country. However, there are basic things even as health has been devolved that have not been able to be put in place to even have this rollout take place.
Even the reporting of what came out of the pilot, it's been wanting. every time you ask, the reporting in the papers, what have we been told? Really?
There has actually been no report.
What actually have we been told?
I have nothing. I'm not basing the word success on any, tangible data or information. That I have to say. But, from seeing that the fact that the pilot phase is now actually being rolled out countrywide means that the pilot was successful.
No, it doesn't.
That they consider that this worked.
No.
And that's why they went straight into Parliament and said, now let's give them more money.
It could mean that, but Eric, in this case, I don't think it does. I mean, one of the things you do with the pilots is this. It doesn't just afford you the opportunity to understand what you should do, but also what you shouldn't do. So, what the report does, it lays out clearly for all who are understood or who will want to implement it fully that this is what we have found. These are the things that will work. These are the things that we think will not work. And these are the things we tweak. Now, before even full implementation, usually there is a period when you sort out these kinks that were found within that phase of piloting it. After the kinks have been sorted out, then you roll out. Now, this one you move from to...
The kinks have not been sorted out. There's still very, very many factors that need to be taken into consideration and actually implemented in order for this UHC to roll out properly. But however, what has happened is that we're going to see a release or disbursement of funds from Treasury, kind of like a forced rollout. This thing needs to happen. Let us go. Because we've said we're going to do it, and we said that by June 2020, the remaining 44 counties would have rolled out this thing. We're going to do it without taking many other factors in consideration. And this is where the problem lies. Those many factors that should have been taken into consideration and reported on were not.
One of them is NHIF, which has actually turned on its own head.
And it's eating itself.
Yes. So now... this particular rollout has a problem even before it has even begun the first inches of movement forward.
There's an issue somewhere.
There are other issues, but we were not even told about these things. Look.
So you see this as the president rejigging the one of the big four, health,
yes.
and saying health requires some fresh ideas, some
actually,
new impetus.
Actually,
let's move the CS. Let's bring in somebody who's actually not even sat in my cabinet from the very beginning.
Yes,
and who has never sat with me to understand exactly what my agenda is.
But is an old hand.
But he's an old hand in government.
Yeah, and in politics. Mutai Kagwe.
And he comes from one of the counties that implemented this.
He does come from the Nyeri county, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. So he's been in politics for a long time. He's been a cabinet minister. So, and there's nothing that you can say during his tenure in the Kibaki era as being wanting.
That you could fault him for per se.
You can't say, this guy's a complete disaster when he was. No. You
don't have much to say.
No. There's a lot that one can say that is positive.
So then, if we go with that same school of thought, then we are saying that the president is very happy with what was happening in the industrialization docket. One of the other big four, manufacturing and industrialization.
Did we see it? We didn't see a move.
We have seen move.
There was a shuffle, yeah.
Movement is that the principal secretary for industrialization has now been made the CS for industrialization, and the CS has been taken to agriculture.
So we see
you are doing so well here. You, Peter Munya, go
come
and
apply yourself
agriculture,
here,
and then you, PS, be the head. So is that what you're saying, that agriculture industrialization was doing so well?
What you could be saying is that I can only speculate. Someone like Betty Maina has actually a very good track record. Remember, she led the Kenya Association of Manufacturers
for over a decade.
Not just led, very successfully.
Yeah.
Strides, new things came into being. Even the partnership within the counties and the business sector. She spearheaded that particular movement and brought in the Commission on Revenue Allocation to try and educate the assembly and people who would be charged with ensuring that there was sufficient legislation to carry out their duties. Even sourced the funding. That was one of the achievements. By the time she was PS, if you look at even the track record in the docket that she's had, it's she fell short of exemplary, really. You don't move someone from being PS to minister unless
they're doing something right.
Something very, very right. Do we have anybody else who has been moved from PS to minister? No.
Not now. But Monica Juma was previously. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So all I'm saying is that both these ladies actually have remarkable careers. They are naysayers who seem to think the opposite. But if there was something wrong, believe me, it would have been stated by now.
Completely.
Oh, yeah, and it would have been blown out of proportion by now.
So it's a big thing that we are seeing, though. Somebody who actually understands industrialization, not just by serving in this government, but by working in
the private sector
for long, being the head of industrial. I think this is a big plus for people who are in the manufacturing sector. The private sector are saying,
whatever they are clapping.
This is it. Our person who has worked with us, who has taken us through this journey, is now at the head of our policy and implementation. And of course, all those things that she was pushing and
at that level, will come to a national level.
Well,
and I think it's
now
something
has
to watch.
The
Absolutely,
government, the power of the government to actually ensure that these things
come to fruition.
Yes.
We hope that her nomination through Parliament sails through smoothly. We don't expect anything more than smooth sailing of that.
Even if there is, if the president is determined that somebody is going to actually take a certain position, that is what is going to happen. Yes.
This is...
I'm putting it simply.
Well, it didn't happen in the case of Monica Juma once becoming secretary to the cabinet.
Well,
remember,
the forces against...
Monica Juma has had, ups and downs.
As I said, but she has a personality and a determination that clearly rubbed some people the wrong way. And if she was cabinet secretary, they were figuring, at what? No. They figured, no. This will be a bit too much. Let us stay where she is.
Secretary to the cabinet? Wow.
No.
Let's
people don't get that jobs unless they really know what they're doing, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yes.
The big one.
Yes,
so let's look at the politics now of it. And what I'm seeing is the president yesterday, from the very beginning, in fact, halfway through his speech, I was thinking, wait a minute, is the president addressing Mount Kenya from Mombasa? Because of the things that he talked about. Let me look at agriculture. And he went and said, looking at the KTDA, we need to revamp KTDA. The Kenyan farmers have had a raw deal in terms of how much they're getting over time. Management of KTDA has been wanting. We have seen a lot of jostling in the leadership of KTDA. We've seen cases in court. In fact, there's a case in court that's still pending that's been led by former PS Irongo Nyakera on the issues of tea. Then he says, you know what, let's also start looking at ourselves versus Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has been doing so well in terms of their tea export. And look at us in terms of our tea export and how much we are earning from this tea. Those guys are doing value addition. We are not doing value addition. We're just selling our basic green tea leaves. And we should do more about that. So he addressed the issue of tea farmers. He also went ahead and addressed the issue of milk. And it's, in fact, here is where you're talking about he dished out cash.
Eric, there's something significant about tea. And this has been an issue. It has even caused some deaths of some people. He has said, tea farmers can sell the tea directly.
Direct.
Yes. Now, it's a game changer.
Oh, absolutely! You cut out an entire business fraternity. You cut out the middleman completely.
For the longest time, if you have followed the politics and the issues around tea, it has been that one middleman. Coffee, middleman. And they've asked, but why is it that one cannot actually just get to sell their tea directly? Remember, this gentleman who passed with the Nyeri governor, he was among the people who actually fought for this. And you're saying, wait, but why must our farmers go through all this? Let them have the alternative of actually selling their tea to whoever it is who wants to buy their tea directly.
Make your decision.
Exactly. I mean, it's their tea. Why must they go through all this circus in selling their product? Now, the president has said, actually, it's a go.
In fact, he was actually giving that example and saying, so a kilo of tea has been sold at 92 bob. The farmer is getting 42 shillings.
Yes.
52 shillings
is
chewed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In between here.
In between.
People who don't produce even...
People who haven't...
Who don't even raise dust.
They're the ones who are eating...
Are the ones who are eating.
The bulk of
this
the
This
money.
is a typical example of where you eat where you've not sown.
So he addressed that. And the issue of milk as well. Now, milk, he said, we are facing a number of issues. One, there is the importation of bad milk from the region,
Uganda,
specifically through Uganda, especially powdered milk. And he said we need to fight this. And he also said, that's one of the reasons why the prices of milk have gone down. So the government is giving out some cash to
500 million to be precise.
500 million
yes.
to mop up the excess milk that we have
and convert it to powder.
And convert it to powder.
Finally, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about innovation, because it's actually something that is quite simple. Because people want to think to yourself, okay, fresh milk, powdered milk, all you're doing is dehydrating it. That's what you're doing. And then you're keeping it as an alternate source to use maybe when you don't have the fresh milk. And this is very easy then for you to reconstitute later, that you can actually send to, areas where there might be things like famine.
Yeah.
These are the things that we should be looking at doing. This is it now, where you say, all right, we're taking the step and moving from where we've been throwing away milk by the thousands of gallons, literally, in Molo. This past 2 months, been throwing away milk because there was a glut. Now we say that excess, the government will take. That's what a government does. When we talk about creating a stable and a conducive environment, that's what you do. You provide the resources so that if there are excesses, you can now have an alternate source for sustainable food in the event that something should happen. That you then have an option.
Yeah. But what our people would do is buy that powdered milk from nations who are in essence also dumping theirs.
Yeah.
So it comes in cheap.
Completely.
Exactly.
Yes.
But
now,
here we are, we can do it for yourself, and that's now when we talk about sustainability, that's what we're doing.
In addition to this, he has also said that there'll be a 16% VAT on any milk product outside
from outside the region.
It's beautiful, if you ask me.
So
it's great.
This is something that could have been done.
Because then what you also do
if I may say so, a hell of a long time
ago. Because
protectionism.
You bring in the element of protectionism, which is necessary then when you're dealing with how to protect your people, and then also your trade regions, to make sure that within your own borders, your people don't have to suffer and pay a hefty penny to get food for themselves. Then you also make sure that then your sources are protected, because then you know that in the future, should something happen, we can depend on ourselves first before having to look outside. So if you ask me, that tax
this thing
is
went
brilliant.
Further. It didn't stop there. He directed NIS to actually interrogate cartels in public institutions who interfere with the market and even have activities that seem to interfere with government budgeting processes. So this isn't that one decision only. But the bit that I really liked is the music industry. Yes. He has said, look, what we are going to do, we are going to give these guys a little more freedom. We are going to allow them to actually produce their content through things like Skiza and what have you, meaning open it up. It's a discussion that's ongoing, but he's opening it up. I remember this issue of musicians and the unions that cater for musicians industry brought up this issue during the funeral of a certain gentleman who passed away some times back called Bruce of the Ambo. And he promised,
I'm going to do something about it.
I will do something about this, and it looks like he's
already doing it.
He already has, yes.
Still on agriculture, rice and banana farmers, 660 million shillings to be used by the government to purchase, because we have a glut as well in the rice and banana areas of Moya and Kano Plains. So let's go and purchase this. So he's basically addressing agriculture, and then he says the CS for agriculture.
Come and go.
Kwenda.
This Mombasa seems to be a good place to get things
It's a place where it's a place where the president works completely. Now, looking at the Nation's headline, where he's talking about has he relieved him of this needs to go and focus on lighter duties, for example, of preparing
for
to be 2022's running mate for William Ruto. And the politics of Mount Kenya still comes in. And that's why I was saying, if you look at what he was addressing, the issues that have been raised about, what the grumblings has been around Mount Kenya, about farmers saying we don't have money in our pockets. We don't have, we need to have things that are helping us. He's addressed those, and then he's taken a swipe at this one person who sits in his cabinet who seems not to be following his instructions on let's work, let's not politic. And he's brought in somebody from the same region.
Just think about it. He's implementing the task force recommendations on coffee. Okay? He's operationalizing the 3 billion rotational fund for coffee. Now, where is coffee most grown in this country?
Central Kenya. Somebody argued, but we had about 1 billion shillings going to the Miraa. Have we seen the impact of that 1 billion shillings that was earmarked for Miraa?
Actually,
is this going to be another talk and no action?
The truth of the matter is this: it's something I actually can't even comment on because I'm not even sure why the 1 billion was necessary, and I'm not sure what it was
actually going to do.
Because the plants from which you derive Miraa, I think, hadn't been cut down. They were still growing. So the produce that is Miraa still existed. So
Market development was also a key thing. You remember the issue of Miraa came to the fore because of what the UK said.
The
banning of Miraa into a key market.
Yes, it is, but I still don't understand. Other markets do open up. Miraa wasn't just sent to the UK. There are other places that consume the product.
Oh, interestingly, even the Scandinavian countries, we are looking at some of the Asian countries as well.
People chew cut.
Oh,
Not
yes,
only
absolutely.
chew, people took it to the next level. They were boiling it, they were figuring out. I'm sure the only thing we hadn't made was mint. Sweet.
Cat mint. All right.
So instead of chewing gum with something else, basically
we hadn't gotten there yet.
Chew Miraa.
So anyway, maybe when I come across literature that explains what this was supposed to be, I'll be able to comment on it. But as of now, I cannot.
Mwangi Kiunjuri says, you can make no mistake, I'm not going anywhere. I believe that in life, good health, happiness and freedom are most important. I thank God that I've held firm and I'm in good health. And he says, with my experience spanning over 25 years, I have a lot to offer. I'll continue to serve this country faithfully in other capacities.
Because I was not able to serve faithfully in this capacity that they had given to me.
God is always brought into this
when there's some kind of drama, God is brought in.
There was a quote that I really loved here. It talked about, God opening one door.
When one closes.
Shut. Okay, sometimes it remains permanently shut.
10 minutes to 7 o'clock. Good morning. This is the situation. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We're taking a look at the movements in the cabinet yesterday. Now let's focus for the next about 7 minutes on Mwangi Kiunjuri's future, or what this means to Mwangi Kiunjuri, whether he's going to be relevant or not. Good morning.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
8 minutes to 7 o'clock. From 7 to 8, we'll be having the Senate Speaker, Kenneth Lusaka, to come and talk about various issues. First of all, is the Senate relevant? Second, what does he think about the BBI? Third, what does he think about this, the cabinet changes and the reshuffle? What does he think about the Big Four agenda? All those things we're going to be asking him shortly. So he'll be joining us in the 7 o'clock hour. So stay tuned. So Mwangi Kiunjuri said, I shall forever be grateful. During the 4 years since December 2015 that I have served in this capacity, I have gained immeasurable experience, exposure, and had an insider's view of how government works, courtesy of His Excellency the President. The President's decision has not taken me by surprise. I thank God. I feel relieved. Why couldn't you just relieve yourself earlier? Anyway, let's continue. Having in the recent past gone through a most difficult year, that on a number of occasions threatened my energy and my resolve. Some of you know that I have endured a lot of humiliation, and only God and my immediate family know how this has made me feel. He was tormented. He was humiliated for a full year.
Okay, sorry.
And he was really wondering, so when are you going to take this burden off me?
It's all God has taken.
If it's your will, God.
Oh, good Lord, Eric.
Remove this cup. And now finally, God's will has come to pass, has been done. To my supporters, I urge you to remain calm, be confident, do not cry for me. You all know that I am resilient. We shall overcome. I have faced many challenges in my life's journey. What I have never failed in is to try. What do you think he's going to try next? Now that he says he's never failed to try and he's going to try, what do you think that he's going to try next? So there are those who are saying that, he's now positioning himself to become the Mount Kenya kingpin. I do not see this happening myself.
No, sorry, neither do I. In terms of his strength politically, I see him as support. I don't see him as a front runner. I don't see him as a leader specifically. I do see him as what you would call the band of merry men that would walk along.
From?
I don't see him wields any kind of political power. Does he have a following that we can see?
Yes, he's talking about 25 years in politics. Remember, this is a man who's been he's been elected.
Yes,
elected to parliament many times.
In answer to my question, then he has a support base in where did he come from?
Laikipia.
Precisely. Where specifically?
I don't remember what constituency, but it
was probably, what's this big town in Laikipia called?
Nanyuki.
Yeah, that one, around that area. Fine.
Finish.
That's where he has a serious support base. And I'm sure he had a track record that enabled him to be re-elected. And he has held other high positions. But this particular docket that he had of late, unfortunately, erased any good that he may have done.
Anything that he may have done, anything that would have been accoladed, anything that would have raised his profile, he managed to erase it.
But this is not how Kenyan politics works. It's not about your track record while serving in cabinet. It's about how loud you are.
But the track record plays a part in getting you elected. It does. The people who are going to vote, people who are going to vote, they're going to ask themselves and ask each other, what is it that he or she has done?
Like especially that particular town of Nanyuki, people consider to be in central Kenya, just so that we understand.
In Nyeri.
Yes. Central Kenya politics, unfortunately, track record does matter. That's what kept him there for the length of time he's been there, which means there was something, he was able to do some good. Central Kenya have a terrible history of ejecting leaders with every election cycle.
In track record, so let's talk about Mutahi Kagwe. Mutahi Kagwe was not elected despite his track record in this last election.
The point is, you've actually given evidence what I'm saying. So Kunjuri was doing something that was remarkable for him to have stayed that long. That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying, by the time you get to a point where you're that high in politics, and then you're removed, and what follows you is a trail of disaster in the ministry that you are heading, it cannot be said that there'll be no impact.
And that is what they're going to use to either elect or reject you. That is what they're going to use. Because
so you don't think he can get any political clout?
If he presents himself, he can. But if he presents himself for some, he says he's coming back in a big way. If he presents himself in this big way, whatever it is, the last 5 years, the last number of years, with all the numbers, even these statistics, this is what they're going to use to judge him. Unfortunately,
here's the issue, though. Yes. Here's the issue. I think the way he's priming himself is to become like the kingpin when it comes to the Tanga wing. So, this is talking about eclipsing the likes of Alice Wahome, becoming the bigger person, the likes of Moses Kuria, the leadership from Mount Kenya that's aligned to Tanga, being their leader. We saw him actually. There were photo opportunities. One of the photo opportunities we saw yesterday was him with Moses Kuria.
It is fine, but if you bring that discussion of Mount Kenya, Mount Kenya begins in Nakuru.
And ends in Meru.
Yes. Now, you have Kiraitu on the other side, who is the senior most politician, right? Your politicians who are coming up in the Nakuru area as very serious politicians. You have former cabinet ministers within that same region who are now governors. I brought this discussion before. He thinks he is the one who is going to become kingpin. Tall order. Sorry. This is politics.
No.
Tall order.
On the Tanga side of those leaders.
He might operate on the periphery, but in terms of taking a central leading role, unfortunately, it's not going to happen.
Who's going to be bigger than him?
No, I'm actually not even going to discuss who's going to be bigger than him. What you are right about, Eric, is that this is politics and this matter is unfolding. Because even his sacking, for all we know, may even gain him even some popularity that we are not aware of.
Right.
Okay? So I am going to wait for this to play out a little more.
But from all indications.
Yes. But what I'd like to add is 5 billion was also released for the resettling of people whose lives have been affected by floods. This is something we need to mention.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a big one.
Well, let's it being released first, shouldn't we?
5 billion.
5 billion.
With the support of development partners and all.
Of course.
This is a lot of money.
Yes.
It's a lot of money that's going to be released. So Mwangi Kionjori is out. Let's see what he does with what he says that he's going to be remaining relevant in politics and seeking to serve, of course, in the future. Then we know that now Mutahi Kagwe, somebody from the greater Nyeri, has been brought in to replace him. So basically just playing the same game.
Is there lesser Nyeri?
No.
The greater Nyeri means there's Nyeri.
Not to replace him.
The greater Nyeri is to replace him in cabinet. The numbers are less. So we have 21, remove one. You need to have 21, bring in somebody. This other somebody is somebody from the same region. I'm saying the greater Nyeri because Nyandarua, Nyeri, and Laikipia are all considered as
Nyeri.
as Nyeri. So you see somebody from Laikipia has been removed and somebody from Nyeri has been brought in.
Next door.
So it's okay.
Yeah,
so it's all right.
It's about the same issue. If you removed somebody from Kiambu and brought somebody from Muranga, that will be another issue.
Actually,
or from Nyeri and brought somebody from Muranga, we'd say, Nyeri people, what has happened to us?
If you actually consider, you do have a point, because the part of the world I come from, they would even ask you say from Meru, they say, oh, so you're a Kikuyu from Meru.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It's coming up to 7 o'clock. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Our guest is in the studio. We'll be talking to him shortly. This is the Speaker of the Kenyan Senate, Kenneth Lusaka, EGH, former governor as well. So he has a lot of experience on the matters of devolution. We'll be talking to him shortly about this. Keep it right here. Let's first take a look at what's happening on the roads. Good morning.
Spice up your life. Traffic.
All right, let's take a look at what's happening around about the city right now. We have definitely, because of the rains, we had showers in different parts of the city today. Langata Road heading to town, traffic has started as far back as the barracks, so it's quite slow and it's likely to add up all the way down back towards the Bomas of Kenya. Kasarani Mwiki, of course, still not moving right now. We have that area. Of course, we are on day 4 of these protests. It's traffic all the way down Waiyaki Way, and it's not letting up in any way, shape or form. Let's see how that looks like in a while. The southern bypass is moving, so if you're trying to avoid Langata Road, there's an alternate for you. It's not so bad. A little bit further, but at least you don't have to be at a standstill. Thika Road traffic is not moving at all. I don't even have any other details apart from that. It's not moving past Garden City all the way down through the Pangani underpass. We are at bumper to bumper. Let's see what it looks like in a short while. But for now, Mombasa Road at the expressway, it's definitely traffic. 0719-012-600. Spice FM KE is us on Twitter. Let us know what you see. Let's keep people moving this morning.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
At 3 minutes past 7 o'clock, good morning and how are you doing? This is the Situation Room, broadcasting in Nairobi, 94.4. We're in Mombasa on 87.9, 102.5 in Kisumu, 96.0 in Nakuru, Eldoret, 96.7, Nyeri, 90.9, and Malindi, 97.7. Live streaming on our digital platforms, www.spicefm.co.ke, Spice FM KE on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Now, we have a guest in the studio this morning that we've been telling you about, and this is the Speaker of the Senate, Kenneth Lusaka. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you.
And asante sana for joining us.
Asante.
You know, you have a very busy schedule shortly when you when you reconvene.
Yes.
So it's good that we have you now before you become completely busy.
Right.
Of course, you're always busy. There's a lot of work that you've been doing in the Senate. First of all, congratulations for joining the Senate and becoming the second Speaker of the Senate under this dispensation. You came in and faced a Senate that had served 4 years, the first term, and now you're spearheading the leadership of the Senate in the second term. You had also served as a governor, and you worked as governor for an entire term. So you know these things about Senate and the role of the Senate in protecting devolution, and that's what is said in the Constitution. So I'm going to just go straight into it. However, is the Senate relevant?
Yeah,
really?
Of course. First, thank you very much for hosting me. The creation of the Senate, one, was not an accident. This was a decision made by Kenyans, and it was the understanding that there needed to be an institution to protect devolution. Because remember, Kenya has had a Senate. This is not the first time we're having a Senate. We had a Senate in 1963, after independence, to around 1966. And it was abolished, and that also went with Majimbo. Remember, there was a Majimbo government which had been proposed. So I think for purposes of defending devolution and county governments, and one of the issues that one of the milestones in the 2010 Constitution was devolution, the chapter on devolution. And remember, it was also very contagious. People were very passionate about it.
Yeah.
So we needed to have a house that defends that. And that's clearly demonstrated when it comes to allocation of revenue. Remember, we had a stalemate with the National Assembly about the division of revenue that goes to the counties. They wanted a figure that was lower. We wanted a figure that was higher. So you can imagine if there was no institution to talk about, to protect the interests of the counties, then, one day somebody can just wake up and say, to hell with the counties, and then we centralize everything. So I think the Senate is very, very relevant. And of course, I know there have been those perceptions like, what does the Senate do, blah, blah, blah. And that's why we came up with an initiative of what we call the Senate Mashinani, where we take the Senate to the ground, to the counties, for them to see exactly what we do.
You went to, was it Makueni or Kitui?
We were in Uasin Gishu the other year. The first year we went to Uasin Gishu, Eldoret. Then this last year we were in Kitui.
Yep.
And this year we are yet to agree on where we are going, but we'll make sure we have a regional division on where we go. Our intention is eventually to get to all the counties.
So your job now comes in when it comes to division of revenue, right? Yes. How much money goes to the counties?
Right.
When we have issues about, checking what the counties are doing with the finances that they've received, you also come in. But at the tail end, after the Auditor General has audited and come up with a report, and then now we see you summoning governors to come and explain some things. But we don't see you cracking any whip. So there are many people who will say that, yes, the Senate is there, the Senate speaks, but that's all it does. They have absolutely no teeth to bite.
It's good you have raised that question because our role is very clear. Okay, oversight, we must, since we appropriate, we determine the amounts of money that go to the counties. The Senate was also given the oversight role in Article 96, the oversight role. And one of the issues that the Senate has been raising is, one, to get funds to assist them oversight so that we don't just become morticians, looking at
the very end.
At the very end, when it's dead. We want to go and see some of the problems that are affecting counties, how the monies are being saved, because, there are some cases where the Auditor General comes up and says, money was spent on a project which is non-existent on the ground. So if such things come up, the Senate should be able to move there. We made progress last year, but again, we're just hoping that when we reconvene, we can then be able to get the oversight money so that the Senate can be more active than it is at the moment. As it is now, the Senate, what is it called? CPIC, the Public Accounts and Investment Committee of the Senate, looks at all the reports that are brought in by the Auditor General. All they do is to make recommendations. In fact, these days we have officers from the EACC also sitting in during the deliberations because the Senate doesn't have the prosecution powers. All they do is to make recommendations to the relevant institutions where, say, money has been misappropriated or money has disappeared. Then they make recommendations to relevant institutions like the EACC, maybe for further investigation, because the Senate is not
an investigative arm
or prosecution. We don't have prosecutorial powers. So then the EACC and the DCI take over those cases, and it's up to them now, once the reports have been finalized and forwarded to them with the recommendations, to look at the recommendations and take action from there. So we have that separation of power. So I can say the Senate has done their bit. And by the way, so far so good, they are up to date in terms of the reports that have already come to the Senate. Unlike in the past, where they'll be looking at reports of, for example, 2013, 14, 15, 16, they are now up to date with the reports that have come from the counties, which is very commendable.
Two questions that come out of that, of what you've just said. One, you've talked about, of course, the money for oversight, and this means that you are not facilitated to oversight, which means that, what I was saying, no teeth. Anyway, second question is you've talked about you handing over your reports and recommendations for further investigation to the EACC. So you'll tell us about the number of cases, for example, that you've handed over to EACC.
Right. I think there are over 30 counties that have already, those reports and recommendations have gone to the EACC. I can't remember the exact number. I know there are about 30 that have been forwarded by CPAC to EACC and other organs with recommendations on what needs to be done. Like I said, there are cases where there is need for further investigation. There are cases that need maybe direct prosecution, for example, where it's clear that maybe funds have been misappropriated, and why the governors are summoned, and maybe the law needs to be checked. Because again, having been a governor, and I did raise this when I became the Speaker of the Senate, that the law as it is now, the governors are not the accounting officers. The accounting officers in the counties are chief officers who are appointed by the CECs. The CECs. The CECs are appointed by the governor. Then the CECs, they vet. No, they're not. The CEOs, chief officers, also appointed by the governor in writing, just like the principal secretaries. And I've also served as a permanent secretary before in the midst of livestock development. So if you realize that the governor is not an accounting officer. So the person who does the day-to-day procurement, the day-to-day running of the counties is the chief officer. So again, the governor just comes there, and what happens is he reads a report that has been prepared for him. He cannot go beyond that. The people who really know, unless is a governor who micromanages or is hands-on and you want to micromanage everything, you realize that the people who should be held directly accountable are the chief officers and the CCs who run the ministry. So again, that is an area that maybe needs to be looked at, even the conversations that have been going on. If you want to hold the governor accountable, then we must change the law to make him the accounting officer of the county.
All right. Well, I think just talking about accountability now when it comes, of course, to governorship, I think there are a lot of questions that are being raised then because now with what we've seen recently when it comes to the impeachment of certain governors, or at least the clamor for that, or for certain, things to come to the fore, then what kind of trust or in terms of buffering for the people can we see? Because then the buck then stops with the Senate. When it comes after impeachment, then if any kind of convictions will be made, of course, now that lays squarely in your hands as the Senate. Of course, in some cases, Kenyans are baying for blood and to say something should actually be done. Now, in terms of holding them accountable, this is one of the areas that we see that responsibility will be played out. How do you see that?
You are right, completely right. And I know sometimes what we call we should not allow mobocracy, lynching of people without the Senate, just like a court, goes with the evidence before it, and that's why we have been telling. And even I'm going to Maralal today after here, and what I'm doing is to sensitize the county assemblies that if you want to impeach a governor or you to take action, do a good job. Don't just be in a hurry. Don't be malicious, because sometimes, it's more of blackmail. Because, you have been refused to a trip or something like that. Then, you hold benchmarking. Benchmarking. Then you hold the governor at ransom when it becomes a bit difficult. You say we are impeaching him. So I think as a Senate, we want to raise the threshold of the impeachment, because impeachment is really the last process that should happen to a governor. And therefore, that's why when the Taita Taveta one came, Samboja, you realize that you can tell that it was hurriedly done. There were a lot of loopholes, the things are not adding up. And I don't think the Senate is there to be used to rubber stamp bad decisions that have made at that level. So we want the Senate to remain above board, and that's why even when the impeachment process is there, we normally insist that the Senate for that particular area plays not an active role, because then again, most of them also have their own interests. Of course. You may have a senator who is interested in becoming a governor.
Of course.
So we're trying to safeguard those kind of interests, especially when it comes to when a governor is before the Senate or when he's appearing. Like the last Senate, it was very clear where, for example, you had my friend Bone Khalwale being in Sepak and then summoning Oparanya to come. I mean, your fate is already decided, and yet the senator had decided that he was going to run for governorship. So I have tried, using my experience, having come from the other side as a governor and now as a speaker, I've tried my level best to minimize those instances so that people don't cast aspersions on the Senate when it comes to matters of impeachment and other issues.
But is there conflict of interest, if you'll be honest with us? us and tell us, is there conflict of interest? Because that's a perception that a lot of people have, that, you know what, forget about it. If it gets to the point where we're looking for convictions at the Senate level, and you say these are senators who want to at some point maybe become governors, it will never happen. Because God forbid you be in a situation in the future whereby you are up on the chopping block. You don't want people to sink you either.
No. In fact, on the contrary, I want to defend the Senate. And if you look at the Senate, not to be very sincere, if you look at the senators that we have, most, if not 90%, are people of integrity. People who have served this government in various capacities, and that's what the Senate was meant to be. I've heard people saying nyumba ya wazee. It is right. It should be a nyumba ya wazee, where if there are too many hot things in the lower house, the National Assembly, they should come now to the Senate for sober discussion and wisdom. So when you look at people like Mzee Yusuf Haji, you look at Ndwiga, former minister, you look at Wetangula, former minister, Orengo, former minister, Amos Wako, the longest serving Attorney General in Africa or I don't know in the world. So that kind of resource, human resource in the Senate is beyond reproach. And that is where we want the Senate to be. That the Senate should be a house of integrity, of people. When people come to Senate, they should expect justice.
Will there ever be convictions at the Senate level?
Yes. You remember the last Senate, Wambora was impeached, the Senate, the governor for Embu. Actually, he stayed in the office courtesy of courts. And that's why there must be, and we also don't want to interfere with the works of the court. But again, the courts are the ones who should also now look at what has been put before them and then make their own decision. But if we are working in sync and, everybody, we can see that, this is a problem and blah, 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 we'll do our bit in terms of what, as a Senate, hand over to, if somebody goes to the court, he has a constitutional right to move to court, and the court has its own way of dealing with the matter. It doesn't mean we have not done our bit.
Have you received the impeachment notice for Kiambu?
Yes, I have received, and we reconvening. We are on recess until 11th of February, so we are going to have a special sitting. And people have been. I even read in the paper saying, "Oh, the Senate was giving a lifeline to Governor Waititu because of the timelines." One, I think the law did not anticipate that an impeachment motion will come up when we are on recess. That being the case. Our standing order number 30 requires that the leader of majority or minority writes to the speaker with the backing of 15 senators who are, of course, that 15 is our quorum, to seek for a special sitting. But again, that was only, it was anticipated that we will be in session. So while we were out of session, I have had to use my standing order number 1, which gives the speaker discretion now to make a decision on what is not covered in the standing orders. So I've combined standing order number 1 and 30, and the leader of majority has now written and asked that we have a special sitting on 21st, which we shall do. We shall reconvene, have a special sitting, and it's that sitting that we shall decide. There are 2 ways of doing it. One, either we have the allegations heard in plenary, the whole house, or we form a committee of 11 members, 6 from the leader of majority, 5 from the minority side, to look at to investigate the allegations and bring a report for plenary within 10 days. So those are the options. That's a decision that shall be made on 21st when we meet.
What kind of politics are we likely to see here? Well, I know you can't say this because you'll be speculating on your membership. Yes. But from out here, the kind of politics that we see is the speculation is that when this matter comes before the Senate, the issue of Tanga Kieleweke, BBI is going to take center stage. So even the formation of this, even if you were to form that committee, a special committee, the 6 members from the majority, it will be looked at who is the leader of majority in the Senate. Is Tanga? Does he support the embattled governor? Yes. So how is he going to form this committee? Who is the leader of minority? He's from the BBI. So this is what's going to happen. How do you ensure that politics does not?
When the names, of course, we can't run away from the politics. We are not living in isolation. But it's my prayer, because once the names are proposed, the names will be brought to me. I think will be discussed. They will be brought to me by Friday. Then we will have what we call House Business Committee. House Business Committee has both leadership of majority, minority, the whips, and of course the Secretariat, and I chair the House Business Committee.
Yep.
We'll then look at those names and then take the names now. Before the names are, are accepted, they will have to be approved by the whole House.
Yeah.
So I think that, and I want to be very clear that the House so far has remained solid, has remained united as one.
Non-partisan
on most of these issues. And I know that, the Senate is now going to be on trial, how we manage the issue, because of, we will look at what is before us, not what is in what
not
rumors,
in public domain.
Public domain. We look at whether, because we also don't want to prosecute matters that are in court, because if you bring matters that are in court, then that will be sub judice. So we can be challenged. So we're just hoping that whatever will be brought as the allegations, they will be looked at objectively, so that everybody gets a fair hearing in terms of the position of they hold.
Since you became Speaker of the Senate, what would you say is the one thing that the Senate, a landmark, something outstanding that the Senate has actually achieved, and something that can be counted to being beneficial to the citizenry of this country?
One is the Senate machinery. That we've taken the Senate to, when we go to, most people may not understand the Senate machinery. When we go, for example, when we're in Kitui, one, we invite the neighboring counties to also come. We hold all our Senate programs just like when we are in Nairobi. The committees meet. Then we have sessions where the locals, the county that we have visited, and the neighboring people and governors come, and we can hear petitions, because one of the issues that comes to Senate is petitions. We also have statements that are sought by Wananchi. So we deal with the issues that come from that particular county. You remember when we were in Eldoret, the issues of maize were very hot, and there was those who were very agitated, and they were talking about, Etangula Murkomen, you have been talking so loudly, now talk about maize, and you remember, you are here, those kind of things. So that kind of interaction with the people, to me, has made the Senate visible. Because, like in the past, like you're saying, most people did not understand what the Senate was doing. And then again, the bills that we have passed, for example, the assumption of office bill, which is now law, the president assented to it, that has given a clear guideline on what happens when a governor leaves an office and there's a new governor. You see, in the past, it was chaotic. A governor comes, when I was in Bungoma, he's very excited, he wants to take over, and then he sacks everybody, which is illegal. He sends away the CEC for finance and doesn't know that the CEC finance is the one who has the signatories at the central bank. So the government grinds to a hold. The CEC, for example, roads can disappear with graders or the trucks. There's no proper handing over. So that has been streamlined. That you see, before you leave office, you must prepare a proper handing over report. The CCs must be there for a certain period, and I'm happy that even now the proposal by the BBI also that within, if you don't have a deputy governor within a specified period, you must be able to appoint a deputy, so that we don't run into a crisis like Nairobi and all those kind of things. We have also had a bill on a land index bill, which is also going to assist the county governments to raise their own revenues, because again, we are saying we don't want a situation where counties are relying on the national government for all the money. So you have to wait. Whatever they have been raising, is very little, it's minimum. They have been given only a small latitude. We have the warehouse receipt bill, which is now dealing with the post-harvest, because again, the way we have managed our post-harvest, like maize and all that has been chaotic. So there are very progressive bills that have been passed by the current Senate, and we are moving forward. We have also been very careful not to claw back the gains that we have made, in terms of devolution. And we have remained firm, even during the standoff between the two houses. We just became Solomonic and said, now the counties are suffering. You remember the story of Solomon, where the two mothers were claiming.
So you are the real mother.
We are the real mother. We say we are the real mother. If counties collapse, they are going. We thought maybe this is a trap. They want the counties to collapse. So they say now the Senate is the one that has strangled devolution. So we said no. We shall live to fight another day. For now, let us sit ground so that counties don't continue suffering.
You talked about those two bills. The number of bills that you've passed. Yeah. Where do those bills originate? Do they originate from the Senate? Do they go at all at any point to the National Assembly?
Yes, they originate. I've talked about bills, like the two I've mentioned, they originate from the Senate. For example, the Assumption of Office bill, it had to originate from the Senate because that is our mandate to take care of the counties. Yep. There are those that originate from the Senate, then they go to the National Assembly. Unfortunately, sometimes there has been a lot of delays at the National Assembly, and that's what has brought a bit of conflict. Again, there are bills that come from the National Assembly to the Senate. Sometimes there is disagreement, and when there's disagreement, like when we disagreed on the division of revenue, we form what is called a mediation committee. Again, the mediation, we go there, and I think also that needs to be looked at because the way it's constituted now, it's not possible sometimes to agree because you have equal numbers and everybody is going to pull on their own side unless, reason prevails. And
or the executive pulls some weight.
Yeah, some weight, maybe, because again, there should be concurrence between the two speakers, myself and the Speaker of the National Assembly. And that's why you had the senators last year got so agitated and said, there are bills that had been taken for presidential assent without the concurrence of the Senate. And that's why they went to court and they wanted an interpretation of what should exactly happen or a ruling so that, we don't have this kind of conflict.
I was using that question so that I can highlight the issue that we are discussing. So every bill that originates from the Senate must go to the National Assembly.
Must go to the National Assembly.
Not all bills that originate from the National Assembly must go to the Senate.
No.
Now, so this therefore means that the Senate is an appendage of the National Assembly.
It cannot be.
Because you don't have the powers to actually come up with the legislation and go through the whole entire process of making the new law and taking it to the president for assent. You must seek the concurrence of what you seem to consider to be the lower house, but what's clearly emerging here is the upper house.
No, let me temper the question, Excellency, by saying,
yes.
From a layman's perspective, we take the view that when you have an upper house, that is the house that the lower house ought to be referring to.
Yeah, yes. Not the other way around.
But we seem to see the opposite happening.
Yeah, there was some mischief that happened in Naivasha. Yes, the original proposal, constitution, clearly stated that the Senate was an upper house, just like other jurisdictions in the world over. Yeah. In fact, you see, Kenyans, we have been very afraid of even calling. It's only in Kenya where the Speaker of the Senate is referred to as the Speaker. In all other jurisdictions, you are the President of the Senate. Even in Rwanda here, where we have...
where they've benchmarked from us.
Yes, we have benchmarked from us. The Speaker of the Senate is referred to as the President. In fact, when I go to France, they say, Mr. President. President, yes. So the mischief was... the people who are now working on the Constitution were themselves members of the National Assembly because there was no Senate.
Yep.
So there's no way they would have given themselves a lower position.
Yes, so they mutilated what was there, not knowing that they were going to end up in the Senate. Most of them were Tangula, Orengo, or they were in Naivasha. And are the ones who, in fact, I think Senator Wetangula had proposed that the Senate be sitting for 3 days in a week or something, or once after 2 weeks. So they end up in the Senate, and now they find themselves as senators. With some members who are in the Senate, like Kangata, at some point when they were in the National Assembly, they proposed that the Senate be abolished. Now they are members of the Senate. So sometimes when you dig a hole, don't dig a long one because you might
find yourself
in the hole. Yeah. So I think you are right that. That needs to, and this is the conversation I have been putting anytime I have an audience. That as Kenyans, we need to be very clear what we want. Because even the conflicts that exist between the Senate and the National Assembly is because of the ambiguity that we created. We look like a wild beast. It's neither a horse or,
let's be donkey or a cow.
Or something.
Which one is it?
So let's be clear that this is an upper house.
That's an interesting sentiment because now if you look at the oversight rule and what we saw recently with two senators obviously giving their support to the governor of Nairobi in court, what was the sentiment that came out of the House, out of the Senate from that? Because for a lot of people it was like, okay, wildebeest, horse, cow, donkey, what exactly are we doing here?
Are you oversighting or are you...
Hairy donkey. Are you oversight or are you part of the pot, this pot that we don't understand the food that's coming out?
I don't want to get into that so much, but it happened when we were on recess. So we've not looked at it as a whole, but we had senators commending some, saying actually maybe it's their constitutional right to practice. Others saying it will be a conflict of interest. Obviously, clearly, of course, when the matter comes to the Senate and you're the leader of majority and you are maybe representing, say for example, the matter comes up for impeachment and you are there. Maybe the only prudent thing to do is to declare interest and have the deputy take the lead in that. So that puts you in a very awkward position. But that again, we leave it to the conscience of the senators to see that whether it's right or wrong, because if they will want to participate in what goes on in the Senate, then they will have to make a clear decision on that aspect. But we obviously is an issue that needs to be looked at.
It was an eyebrow-raising one.
Yeah.
So what's likely to happen when you come back? Because the issue, I see some senators have said that they'd like to raise this issue with you when you reconvene and say, look, you need to give a ruling on this and the way forward. We've seen even the president saying this is a matter of direct conflict of interest. There's even a bill on conflict of interest.
Yes.
Then we've seen the same senators who have been cited and MPs also saying, look, this conflict of interest story, we're going to make sure that it goes nowhere. We're going to amend it so that it suits the reality, what they consider reality.
Yeah, I think it will be looked at from the broader perspective, because we know the Parliament is not only composed of lawyers. We have engineers, we have doctors, we have all these things. So I think the whole thing maybe will be looked at, and that's where it may run into some trouble, because you may now be affecting the entire house, because people have come from the various professional backgrounds and they are only here for a contract of 5 years. They are not sure that they will come back. So it's a conversation that needs to be looked at broadly, not just focusing on maybe the lawyers who are in Parliament.
Yeah.
But again, that's a conversation that we can have maybe later. I don't want to preempt, because if the matter is going to come to me, then I also have my own legal team that advises me on certain matters before I make certain rulings. Yes.
So we have the Speaker of the Senate, Kenneth Lusaka, in the House. He's the President of the Senate, he's told us. At 28 minutes to 8 o'clock, we are continuing the conversation, but first let's take a look at what's happening on the roads, and then we come back. We have a lot to discuss with him, of course. There is the issue of BBI, the politics that's playing its center stage in the country. Of course, it's coming also to the Parliament, both houses of Parliament. Do we need a referendum? Do we need to go through just a parliamentary way of implementing BBI? We need to hear from him on this. We also want to understand what he thinks about 2022 politics and shaping up of 2022 politics, especially in Western Kenya, where he comes from. We'll talk to him about this. Remember, you can also join the conversation. Spice FM KE on Facebook, at Spice FM KE on Twitter, and our hashtag is The Situation Room. Good morning.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Traffic.
All right, it's clear on the Eastern Bypass today as opposed to the issues that we saw there yesterday. So that's an alternate route that you can use trying to get to or away from Thika Road this morning. Still a walking nation at Kasarani Mwiki, of course, because of the road situations there. Kabasarian Avenue then leading into and out of Mudangari and then joining Wayaki Way is giving us some problems this morning. Red Hill Road also is bumper-to-bumper traffic. And, of course, it's jam-packed on Kiambu Road, bumper-to-bumper trying to join Thika Road as well. Coming in traffic, is causing enormous traffic on Thika Road this morning. Dagoretti Corner to the CBD is a mess, unfortunately, and this affects everything else on Gong Road, and also now trying to join the City Mortuary roundabout. Of course, it is the hour when we see high traffic. Let's see what makes a difference shortly. But on Mombasa Road as well, all the way to the Nyayo Stadium roundabout, it's not moving in any way, but it'll ease off later on. 0719-012-600 is the number to call. Spice FM KE is our Twitter handle. Let us know what you see and keep people moving as quickly as possible.
96.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
We've spoken of a situation that, from a layman's perspective, is inversed in terms of the powers that the Senate and what we call, well, you're both National Assembly, but Parliament as we call it, and you're both Parliament, but Parliament where the members of Parliament sit and Parliament where the senators sit. Is it possible, given the current laws that we have, for this situation to not be reversed, but to be set right?
Yeah, this is the conversation that is going on about maybe changing the constitution, looking at the constitution. That's one area that needs to be maybe addressed, to be corrected, so that it's clear that we have a parliament with two houses, the Senate as an upper house and the National Assembly as a lower house. That's not strange. It is in all jurisdictions all over the world where we have a bicameral system.
Right. What would happen in that system? What is it that would be different if we had the Senate as the actual upper house?
You find, for example, if you took the U.S. situation, you find that the vice president is actually the speaker of the Senate. So what would happen is, some of the powers, the Senate would then become a referral, kind of, just like you say, that a lot of issues that have been discussed at the lower house will then end up at the Senate for referral and concurrence. Some of the laws that would have been discussed at that lower level would then be referred to the Senate. For example, even appointment of state officers, vetting of state officers, that should be vested in the Senate. For example, I've mentioned about 10 members of Senate. 10 senators who have been members of who have been ministers. Yes. These are people. If you put Haji, Wetangula, Orengo, Ndwiga, or Chilayako as a panel that is vetting somebody who wants to become a minister, they will be talking from a point of knowledge.
They already know.
Understanding what it is. So those, and then for example, maybe inspector of police, as it is. I think it's only the inspector of the police who's also vetted by the Senate. The rest are done by the National Assembly. So those are some of the areas that need to be corrected, so that then the Senate has those kind of powers. Of course, I know the National Assembly. Nobody wants to release
any authority, any power.
The authority. Yeah. So it will not be a walk in the park. It will be a fight. But I think we need to get sober, and if we want an effective bicameral system, then we must correct that anomaly.
So it sounds like you really support what's contained in the BBI report.
Yes, when you look at it, it balanced a lot of things. They didn't want to raise eyebrows, and that's why everybody said, okay, the report is good. Let us support it, even where it was expected that some quotas resistance. They said no. Let us accept the report. So I think it contained things that are progressive, and hoping that if it remains the way it was, then it's going to be a progressive document.
Remains the way it was. So we wouldn't recommend any amendments to it. Of course, the conversations that we are seeing happening now are still going back to saying, look, people want a powerful prime minister.
Who is saying?
And let's put it correctly.
The media has declaration, for instance.
Certain individuals who have supported the idea of a strong prime minister.
That's why we're saying, that's why I asked who is saying.
And two deputies.
Who is saying that? Because you see, people with interests. And the moment we start, and that's the fear, that the moment we start creating or changing the law with certain positions in mind, certain people in mind to occupy those positions, we lose the bigger picture. We must change, or we must create positions because we think they are necessary and are going to add value. Otherwise, if you ask Mwananchi, and that's why it was not in the report that was presented, because Mwananchi feels the burden is already too heavy. Don't load more on us. And you can say you are reducing. You remember the Punguza Mzigo, whatever conversation. You may say you are reducing even you abolish the women rape or whatever, reduce the MCS, then whatever you have reduced, you are digging a hole to fill another one. Then you create more
a heavy one at the
top, and then you end up paying more money. So you need, first of all, even some of these things that we're talking about, to do an evaluation, job evaluation analysis. What is it going to cost the country if we create some of these positions? Okay, yes, there will be stability party, blah, blah, but at what expense?
Right. Well, you talk about jumping the gun by, basically now starting to have these conversations and these perceptions coming to light. But of course, there's criticism of the regional meetings that we've seen taking place. Of course, there will be another meeting this weekend. Whether they are political or BBI oriented, of course, is something that is in contention. What do you think about that? About these meetings that are taking place? About whether it is shedding light on what the BBI proposes?
I think what needs to be, in my view, is not bad, but what they need to do, I think, to change the format. Because one, the biggest complaint was that even the documents are not with the people. Yeah. So what are you discussing? So you need to avail copies of the report so that people are able to go through, just like the president said, kila mtu ajisome. Once they have read, I think, in my opinion, they should have gone down to smaller town hall meetings, just then to have a conversation and look at the document and let people participate. By the way, I saw even the one in Bungoma, they're going again for another one in Bohungu, is that you start with speeches. So it becomes a formal kind of meeting. Let the minister here talk, let the governors talk.
Political leadership.
Political leadership talk. Then, we have come by chopper, we have to go back, it's coming to rain. So the meeting must end. So wananchi, just taken for a ride, you go there to rubber stamp. And that's why we even came up with what we call public participation bill. So even the concept of public participation needs to be looked at very seriously, because even when I was a governor, and this happens in most of the counties, talking of public participation, do people really participate, or you bring your supporters to come and say yes?
It's choreographed.
Choreographed, and then blah, blah. So I think we need to look at it from a very serious perspective. It's a good idea that you validate what was there, check whether this is what the views that you gave. So then it's a national conversation that is going on. So it needs to be managed, I think, in a better way for better results, and to avoid a bit of resistance.
And how would the task force now be involved in this?
Yeah, this is what I've been trying to think about it, because now with the task force, I don't know at what point they're going to come in, or whether they're going to look at what has been put there, or what is exactly going to happen.
Come back and talk to the people.
Yeah.
Would you participate in this? So there's one, of course, that's happening.
Will
in
you
your
travel
backyard.
to Western this weekend?
Are you traveling there this weekend?
I'm a referee in this matter, and the issues will be coming to Parliament, to the National Assembly, and to the Senate. So I would be reluctant to actively participate at this point in time, and rather wait for the report to come. Because if I go there, I will be forced to maybe make some remarks. So obviously, I cannot be ignored.
You'll be invited.
I'll be invited, but I've not been invited. I'll be invited to speak.
To speak to the people.
While I'm there, and as a senior member from that region and the Speaker of the Senate in the Republic of Kenya, I would not want to commit myself on issues that are going to come to my house, because then I would have already taken a position. And I'm supposed to remain neutral and guide the whole process so that we have a good product.
What's your opinion on the best way forward? Referendum, or we avoid the referendum and just have everything handled in Parliament?
This is my view, and I've said this, and of course there are two aspects. One, that there are people who feel Parliament can easily be compromised. There are those fears, blah blah. But again, in my own opinion, we must make up our minds. If we want to continue with the agenda 4 that the president has put for us, the referendum way will be a dangerous route to take. Because if we recall, referendum is politics. If we recollect what happened in 2005, I remember that time I was at DC in Marakwet, chungwa and banana.
Right.
There were some areas in this country where you would not sell bananas. There were areas in this place where you would not be seen eating an orange. It became that contagious, and you remember that took us to 2007 elections. So if we are going to go the referendum way, you can take this to the bank. The country is going to be polarized. Already you can see what's happening. We're going to be divided. The rift is there. We are going to be polarized. Those who are going to support, depending on what the questions will be. So if the question will be something that will be contagious, we will be divided, and that will be the beginning of politics until 2022. It will be difficult then to implement the agenda for that the president has given us. So my view is that as much as we may, because you get the leaders you want, members of parliament, senators were elected.
Right.
And in a representative democracy, it is assumed that my senator Wetangula talks on behalf of me.
Of you.
He has consulted the people of Bungoma, and what he brings to the Senate is a representative of what the people of Bungoma. Whether that happens or not is a story for another day. But in representative democracy, you must trust the leaders that you have put there. And that's why, if every Mwananchi has now been consulted and everything like that, because eventually a law will have to be made. You'll have to amend those kind of things so that then it can come to Parliament, both the National Assembly and the Senate, then to just wind up. Whichever way it goes, it will end up in Parliament. So we have to make a choice.
There are those who argue that, going the referendum route is ensuring that everybody is aligned or everybody is on board in this process. This building bridges is not about leaders. It's about everybody, all Kenyans. And if all Kenyans vote on building bridges, then all Kenyans have embraced the concept of building bridges.
That is more theoretical than, than practical. Because even when you go, we have participated in elections. Like I said, a lot of these things is it's more choreographed. You will get people from a region and say, let's go and support this. Let's go and support this, and it's assumed that everybody has participated. So why don't we spend less funds on? You say maybe people will be bored. Why don't you buy fewer people than buy many? Because
they're going to buy them anyway.
They're going to buy them anyway if that happens. But that's on a light note. But
in Kenya, it isn't so light.
It's real.
Yeah. So we must be careful and clear on which path we want to take, because we might end up just compromising our development agenda at the expense of politics.
Opening up the phone lines, 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. A question or comment for the Senate Speaker, Kenneth Lusaka, who's been with us since 7 o'clock. Of course, he's told us very many things that he thinks of how the Senate is performing. He's giving us wisdom on how the country should move forward. We have him for a couple of minutes, so you can call in now, 0719-012-600. Also, post your comments on Spice FM KE Facebook, at Spice FM KE Twitter. Good morning. 13 minutes to 8 o'clock.
.9 Spice FM, Mombasa. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
It's interesting, Honorable Saka, that you talked a few minutes ago about, safeguarding the development agenda of this country. And yesterday we saw a reshuffle happen in cabinet. And we saw that perhaps there are moves now being made to safeguard this development agenda. What are your thoughts about these moves that have been made? Political, developmental?
No, of course, the prerogative of appointment of ministers, principal secretaries lies with the president.
Right.
And of course, the president, in his wisdom, wants to maybe get a team that is going to deliver his agenda. And normally, when you are the captain, you look at how people are playing, and sometimes it's good to substitute,
or bench someone completely.
Bench somebody completely, substitute, remove them. Yeah, if you realizes you are good in defense, maybe moves you from, if you are not scoring, you put you at the defense. So that's the position. It's his prerogative, and I think that's what he's doing to make sure he gets a team that is going to deliver for him, because really people voted for the president and the presidency, him and the deputy president, and he wants to leave a legacy, and therefore things must just work, and that's, I think, what he's trying to get at.
So we've been in limbo as a country.
Not in limbo, Just saying, maybe, when you make that kind of reshuffle, you must be having good reasons why he's adjusting his team. I don't want to think on his behalf because he is my president and I know he means well for the country, and that's why he's doing that, to make sure that we move forward. And the things he talked about are very key. For example, the agricultural sector. Remember, he focused so much on agriculture because that's the backbone of our country, and many other things that he talked about that affect Mwananchi. So, I mean, for me, that is progressive.
Let's pick one or two questions, Brother Senator. Okay. Speaker. Karaoke from Wakulima Market in Nakuru. Good morning, Karaoke.
Good morning to you. Good morning, Speaker.
Good morning to you, Karaoke.
This is for you, my dear.
Yes.
This is a question I want to ask you. I know, according to studying orders of Parliament, or rather, let me call it Senate.
Yes.
In most cases, when we want to come out with men and women who continue, and especially asking questions from within the country, and a very important question like the one that is in BBI, those men and women should go through a certain process, right?
Oh, yes.
And in this case, the 14 guys were chosen by just 2 men. The man on the hill and were nominated, or rather chosen by 2 men. President Uhuru Kenyatta and, in fact, Raila Odinga, isn't it?
Yes.
I heard this other time when Kioni, who is the committee chair of the interpretation of the law, the Constitution, saying that he does not even understand how these men and women came into being. So, point number 2, the Kenyans, the way we are today, we are already overburdened. And in fact, when that team came, especially to my county here in Nakuru, they went to America Hotel, which is a 5-star hotel, where you don't expect Mwananchi to attend. And I heard Mr. Koiga and some other prominent guys talking on our behalf, and he never sent anybody there. So do you think we, as Kenyans, we contributed into whatever is in the BBI? Point number 3.
No, those are enough, Karaoke. Answer those 2 so we can pick more.
Yeah, I think he asked, let me answer Karaoke. One, there are 2 ways in which you can raise your issues with the Senate.
Yep.
One is through your senator, you can bring a statement, or you can send it direct to the clerk and then the speaker will read it. Or 2, you can do it by way of a petition. You write a petition which you can again come through your senator, or you can write it to the speaker or to clerk. I'll be able to read it. And in the case of a petition, we will look at the issues that you have raised and give it to a committee that will then look at the issues and respond back to you within 60 days. In terms of a statement, we'll also seek for an answer. Normally, I've been giving 14 days, during which time a response should have been given back to whoever has asked the statement. Now, of course, you remember that the 2 principles of the BBI is His Excellency the President and the former Prime Minister. And they had their own reasons why they picked the people that they picked. And I think what you are raising is important, that in terms of operationalization and public participation, what I raised earlier, that are we reaching out to many people who want to participate in this? And maybe the Karaoke and others should now take this opportunity that the document is coming back to you to validate, to look at what is there. And if what you think your issues, you are not properly represented, you have an opportunity to contribute then. But I think those are lessons learned, and those are the kind of things that
we can take from
we can take from there.
Sami Magarini, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
How are you doing?
Good morning.
Your question to the Senate Speaker?
Yes, one question. I would like to ask the Speaker of Senate about validation. Do we really see any sense when people gather, but without the committee who are supposed actually to take down or to note down whatever issues people have to be included in the BBI, coming BBI, like the one we saw in Kisumu? There were no any committee. Was that any legitimacy? Was there any legitimacy in holding that meeting, please?
Thank you very much. Let's hear from Hussein in Nairobi. Good morning, Hussein.
Good morning. How are you guys?
We're fine,
thank you.
Yes, my question goes to the Speaker.
Right.
Something that I've always thought about. Now, the governor and the senator comes from the same party.
Right.
They campaign together. They come together. And then you expect the senator to provide oversight. What happens when the senator actually goes missing in action. And there's no oversight whatsoever in the county.
In that county.
Because it has happened. It has happened. I don't want to mention the counties, but actually it is happening. Like total no oversight whatsoever. The governor does whatever that he wants.
Thank you very much. Good questions.
True. That's a very good. Let me start with the last question. Actually, that is true. The same questions have been raised in some counties that I know, where I find the senator and the governor from the same party, and therefore they go to bed together, and therefore nothing really goes on. What should really, and that trickles down even to the members of the county assemblies, where you may find the majority are also from the same party. And I didn't have that
honor and privilege.
I had a lot of opposition when I was the governor. The leader of majority was from the opposition, so he would propose my agenda and is the first one to shoot it down to oppose it. So it becomes very, very, very difficult to run. But I think we should have men of integrity, that oversight just remains oversight, so that they're able to put their governors on their toes, not out of malice. And that's why I've also been saying that the county assemblies, now that he raises that, the county assemblies also have a key role to play, and we've tried as a Senate to give them financial autonomy. Because you can expect a situation where the county assemblies are going to inspect a project and they are being sponsored by the governor. The transport is the governor, lunch and then allowances and all that. The outcome of that kind of meeting is obvious. So they don't even have to go to the field; they just can sit down and write the report. So, but if we have autonomy, where they can be able to have their own funds and initiate the oversight process themselves, then it will make a lot of sense. And those are some of the changes those are some of the things that I would like to see. Even one day when I exit as a speaker, I would like to see some of those things really implemented, that the county assemblies are strengthened, we have built their capacity, and they are able to carry out their oversight without undue influence from the executive.
In terms of an agenda then for 2020, because we started off this year saying, okay, these are some of the things that we should see coming to probably the end of tenure of one administration in another 2 years or so, less than 2 years. Coming out of the Senate, what do you hope to see that will be established definitely this year? We can say we've moved forward.
That is one of the issues that I have been pushing so much, the autonomy, financial autonomy of the county assemblies, and then building their capacities. They have an organization called CAF. They also want it anchored in law, so that they have something that they can be, that is legal and which can be putting them together to discuss their issues. So I think those are some of the things that I will be really pushing and looking forward to having them go through the Senate. Then there was, of course, that other question that was asked about the committee not being in place, and then these meetings are taking place. So who is taking? In fact, I was reading on social media, somebody was asking the Bungoma team, so who was the secretary on what you are discussing? And nobody seemed to know. To be very clear on who took notes, who took the minutes. So this is just some chat, some conversation. So and I think that's why the committee has now been. I think the president gazetted the committee, and I think that's going to be one of the part of their roles. Maybe they will have. I don't know how they're going to operate, but I presume maybe some of them will be in some of those meetings, so they're able to guide the discussions and take people through what is there and then what can be added or subtracted.
We want to thank you very much, Senate Speaker Kenneth Lusaka, for joining us this morning. Thank you very much for all the wisdom that you've given us and told us how the Senate is working, how you'd like to see the Senate working going forward, and of course devolution. Everybody around the country seems to agree that devolution is a good thing. It was a good decision that Kenyans took and Kenyans made, but safeguarding devolution is a key role that must be played by all citizens, the county assemblies, the county executives, and now, of course, we're talking about the Senate. And the Senate will have a very, very important role to play in this. We hope that we are going to see a lot of you, the kind of rulings that you give. And I think before even you leave, we'll ask you to stay for like maybe 2 or 3 more minutes so we can take a closing round of questions. And then we say asante sana and goodbye to you. So it's coming up to 8 o'clock. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We have on the hot seat this morning Senate Speaker Kenneth Lusaka, who's been speaking to us for the entire hour. Of course, we'll take a few final round of questions. You'll answer a question from Samuel Magarini, who was talking about the committee and whether having those meetings. I think you've answered it in many ways. The role of the committee in spearheading the ongoing conversations about BBI. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Remember, we are live streaming on Facebook, Spice FM KE, and on Twitter as well, Spice FM KE. And you can join the conversation as well by streaming live on YouTube, Spice FM KE. And our website is www.spicefm.co.ke. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
Spice up your life. 102.5 Spice FM. Kisumu. Traffic.
Taking a look at Ngong Road all the way from Racecourse down to town, traffic is thick and absolutely nothing to smile about right now. It's quite chock-a-blocked, and it's going to take us that way to the City Mortuary roundabout, trying to head down Ngong Road all the way to Uhuru Highway. So that is quite the situation. Wayaki Way and the road passing Kianda School is a parking lot. Traffic this last week has definitely been crazy. Of course, the showers this morning compounded the issue. One big parking lot on Langata Road as well, all the way from KWS to the T-Mall roundabout. And there is an issue with the SGR this morning. Unfortunately, that did not run either. Langata Road traffic is terrible as well. So everywhere you look, definitely a traffic situation. That trying to say that we need to sit tight while that happens, and we'll see what happens in a short while. But for now, be patient, approach with caution, and take an alternate route of the bypasses where you can. Spice FM KE 0719 012 600. Let us know what you see, and we'll share that info as best we can.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
2 minutes after 8 o'clock, this is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We have on the hot seat since 7 o'clock the Senate Speaker, Kenneth Lusaka.
If I were to ask a utopian question, what law would you, utopianly speaking, want to see changed so that the Senate actually has the sort of powers it ought to have in overseeing not just the work that the lower house does, but what the governors also do?
I think we need to, we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
No.
We just need to look at the best practices in the world where we have a bicameral system like France, like the US, Australia, South Africa. So we need the law that will really clearly set out the roles, so that this is an upper house and this is a lower house, and then come up also with responsibilities, just like the Constitution says, in Article 96, and we have clearly stipulated roles of the Senate, and like I said, it becomes a referral house where matters that come from the lower house would then go to the Senate for to digest and either concurrence or streamlining, and then it becomes before it's ascended by the president.
If I hear you correctly, this process has begun.
Yeah, we have. We made we gave our recommendations to the BBI, and we are hoping that why it was not prominently brought out, I think, was because the chair and the deputy were all from the Senate. And the fear was that
it looked like
I'm going there to push the agenda. But I think somehow along the way, it will be brought on board.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So, of course, we were talking about the issues of how the counties are operating. There is the question of what it means to not access office. This has gone to court. The court has actually said this, that once you're charged here, you should not access office. It was brought to the Senate. You were not in, so your deputy gave some, not a ruling, but some insights into this, and where he was talking about basically the office is a physical space. Do you agree with that?
I agree with the ruling because, you see, ideally, I would have been the one making that, reading the judgment, because, you see, as my deputy, the Speaker's office is an office. So that's a position that we hold. And, of course, the conversation is also going on like, it is a whole concept that we need to look at. Somebody who has been elected by, say, 1 million people, you are innocent until proved guilty. Then, maybe 3 people sit to decide to remove you in office. The case can drag on for as long as it goes. So
the entire
tenure of your office. Yeah. So are we not shortchanging 1 million people who voted for this person to go to the office? Supposing it turns out that you are innocent and you have been out for the entire period, what happens? Are they going to compensate this kind of person for the time he has been out and the trauma that he's gone through and all that manner of things? So I think we really need to, as much as we are saying, of course, everybody is joining in the war against corruption and to be tough on that. But we must also be careful not to interfere with the rights and of people, and also to interfere with the rights of people who have made a decision that this is, if for example, voting, democracy is, if you are being voted by thieves, then you are the best thief and you are their representative. You are the best thief. If you are being voted by Manambas, the majority are Manambas, they vote for you and you are their representative. That's the cost of democracy. So we must live with it. And in my view, I know this is a conversation that is going on, even it will come to Senate, and people have been wondering, because it started with the governors. It may go to members of parliament, members of the National Assembly. What happens now when a member of parliament is arraigned in court and he's told not to step aside? What happens to the people who have voted for him? So it's something that needs to be looked at. I know the judiciary was also trying to assert themselves, because they have been bashed enough times, you are the weakest link in this war. The weakest link in the war against corruption. But I think that's something that we really need to look at so that we don't end up shortchanging Mwananchi.
What would you do? I mean, if you are the one to actually make this ruling, if it was said that this matter shall be decided by the Speaker of the Senate?
Like I said, you are presumed to be innocent until proved guilty. Remember.
So you continue serving?
Yes,
even though you've been charged for abusing that office that people put you in. So those Manambas or those thieves, they picked you and they told you, go and serve us. Yeah. But they did not tell you, go and steal.
But these are still allegations, remember.
Yes.
They have not been proven. These are still allegations until the whole judicial process is over. And even if you are, say, in the High Court, you will have a right of appeal. You'll go to the Court of Appeal. They'll go to Supreme Court. So until the whole and that is what fairness is all about. Yeah. So until the whole process is completed, how do you just judge this guy? And the whole process, like I said, could drag on for as long as your term. Yeah. So I think I would say, like we say, you are presumed to be innocent until proven guilty.
We want to thank you then very much for coming. Asante sana. You've concluded all our questions. Not all of them. We'll invite you again to come.
Anytime. I'm available. I'm one person who believes in I'm easily accessible. I believe in talking to people, because then you clarify a lot of things.
Right.
Because when you don't talk about some of these things, people live with misinformation and they make conclusions that are not based on any facts. So I will always be available anytime you want me to come around.
You said from here you'll be traveling to Mararal.
Yes, right, we're going to launch the strategic. I'm the guest of honor at the launch of the strategic plan, and I've been also availing myself to the counties anytime they have this official business to do. I always avail myself, because the Senate is the bigger brother of the county assembly, so we must support them.
We must hold their hands.
We must hold their hands until they work properly.
When you get to that region, you'll find us, of course, on 96.0. That's our Nakuru frequency.
Okay.
And then you may also be able to get us.
What is the frequency for Bungoma?
The frequency for Western Kenya, you'll be able to catch us on 96.7 in Eldoret, or from the Kisumu one on 102.5. So you'll be able to capture from one of those, whichever is closer. In fact, we'll get feedback from you on which one is stronger.
It's clearer for you.
Yeah. But also remember, we live stream the show. So on Facebook, on our website, on YouTube, on Twitter, we live stream the show.
So the entire world knows that I'm saying the Senate should be an upper house.
Yes. The whole world has heard you today. The world has heard what you've had to say.
Thank you very much, Speaker.
Thank you so much.
We wish you a good day.
Thank you so much.
Asante sana. This is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. It's now 10 minutes past 8.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Well, this is what we do on this show. Every morning we have somebody on the hot seat. So today we had the Senate Speaker, Kenneth Lusaka. Yesterday we had businessman and Mombasa politician, Suleiman Shabal. Tomorrow we'll be having an expert on locusts. You know, locusts are actually ravaging the country. So tomorrow we want to look at this issue in depth and see what do we need to do as a country to actually ensure that we deal with the locust menace once and for all. Where has the government failed? What are the opportunities for the government to take? Well, and then we continue with that. Ndu.
Right. So obviously we saw a cabinet reshuffle take place yesterday, and of course speculation is rife in terms of what was meant, what was, the thought behind all of this, and to ask ourselves, okay, in terms of a government, what will happen? It seems that clearly coming out of the president's decisions to do this and the appointments that he made thereafter, obviously there's a new life that he's looking for to be injected in governance issues. There's new life that he's looking, or rather to rejig things a little bit and add some spirit into what is going to happen for the development agenda for this country. Very clear that he was dissatisfied, the country dissatisfied with the ways in which they were seeing things having been run at one place, or impressed with what he was seeing in some areas, and said, because of that, let's lift you up and have you now work at the top and get what you're able to do at your level and bring that out for the whole of Kenya to see and for the whole of Kenya to move forward. And it's very clear that he said, okay, with whom we have and a few entrants on another level, let's make sure that we're able to get a working, sustainable, highly efficient government for the next, however long, or until another shuffle or another reshuffle takes place. But let's make sure that we get this vehicle moving. We've been on rev mode for some time now, or in some cases we seem to have been moving in reverse. Now let's get ourselves moving forward. Now what we're saying is that it looks at in some cases that we've just played musical chairs here, and we've just moved things around in terms of bodies moving to another place, whereby we had people doing a good job and they've moved to another area. We don't take much issue with that. But whereby you had the same people mixing about in a pot whereby things wouldn't actually come to light, then there we might have a problem. This cabinet reshuffle does not necessarily guarantee that we're going to see stellar results in certain areas, but what it does, if anything, what it does is that it kind of raises the hopes of people to say, yes, finally, we've not seen things working. Here we have an opportunity that maybe somebody else is going to try their luck and make sure that it works. If we look specifically at what he's been able to do and how he's been able to move things around, we saw where people were actually able to make things work in the docket where they were assigned, and now being taken to places where things were not working so well. And the principle of then application of duties then can actually work. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that because you've put somebody else there that things are going to work. I see this reshuffle as something more like putting some more hope back into the minds of Kenyans to say we can actually do it with different people in these positions. Yeah, so looking at reshuffles around the world that have happened with certain governments, it doesn't guarantee that we're going to see a change. above everything else, what it does show is that, the person at the position of leadership, the person at the executive, is looking for something to say, guys, we've been going in the wrong direction. We're coming to just half of a tenure that I have left in terms of years. I want to make sure that at least we get it right. At the very least, let's get it right and leave people in positions that can actually be pushing this vehicle in the right direction. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't guarantee results, but it put hope in more than anything else.
What would you like to see that then guarantees results?
Well, unfortunately, that's the thing with something like governance.
Is it an overhaul or like a complete overhaul? Like remove everybody and bring a new team?
Oh, in some cases that would be absolutely necessary. But here we have examples that we've seen within this reshuffle of people who've done a stellar job. We talked just a few minutes ago, industrialization. The PS was doing, obviously, has been raised from PS to CS. Obviously, there's something he was doing right. She was doing right, sorry. We've seen the CS for defense having been moved from foreign affairs. There's clearly something she was doing right, and there's something she had which the president felt she could do better in another docket by virtue of her character, perhaps, or maybe other things that were taken into consideration. It doesn't guarantee that over the next 2.5 years, or over the next 1 year and 8 months, that we are going to see stellar results and stellar achievements. But what it does is that it raises the profile of hope for people to say, look, in the areas where we saw that things were not working, maybe what we need is a fresh mind in this docket. And that is what you're giving to people. That is what you're injecting. Because oftentimes, if you look around the world, from Wales to Great Britain to South Africa, when we saw reshuffles like this, it was to get people off of that everlasting feeling of doom and gloom that things are not working. So let's get rid of this and get some new thinking, some fresh blood into this, and that's what would happen essentially.
But in this particular case, the only new fresh blood is one, right? So if people have this feeling that things are not working, things are not moving, and then you basically just conduct some musical chairs, you remove a goalkeeper, make them a striker, move a midfielder.
This is the thing.
Left back.
And in this peculiar case, fresh blood or fresh eyes means
fresh pair of legs.
It means a fresh pair of eyes in terms of, okay, sub or bench completely. Let's get somebody else either who seems to have been getting it right and move them and bring them here where you clearly were not. We saw some people who were ejected completely. 2 people, I think, ejected completely, and others were just moved around. This is what I'm saying. If it was to get better, if it was to guarantee completely fresh, stellar achievements, I think we would have seen a complete overhaul. But in this case, it was to get a fresh pair of legs, is to get a fresh pair of eyes, to say maybe we can move this thing along, folks, because it was clearly not happening in some areas.
So basically what you're saying is application of a Band-Aid. Fresh Band-Aid, but the wound is still there, the leg is still the same, the one that's injured, you have not gone back to hospital, you're not sought new medication.
We're using the fresh eyes to treat the symptoms. In this case, to treat the symptoms. If there's something inherently wrong in how we do things, we've talked many times about how the technicalities or the policies that we have in place in this country are beautiful and they're able to be done very well. But then those who are in the driver's seat sometimes are just not able to carry the day. So now maybe if you have a fresh pair of eyes, then maybe this will work.
Do you think, for example, movement of Rachel Omamo from defense to foreign affairs is reinvigorating our foreign policy? Or is going to sort out the issues that we've had in our foreign ministry? Or is it just, the case of Monica Juma has been having issues with the staff in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and so what we do is, well, Monica, you're good. You're good, but let's remove you from this. Give you lighter duties.
Not necessarily lighter. Let us put you in a place where being contentious doesn't matter very much.
And it's what we need, actually.
Yes, because the Ministry of, say, something like Foreign Affairs, which deals with the diplomacy, that seems to have been an issue. If one hears or one believes, even partially, what has been leveled against Monica Juma, not the most diplomatic of individuals. Now, on the other hand, it could be argued that Rachel Omamo has even worked in that department as an ambassador and worked well. So, again, the truth is, one can't actually know why it is the president made those decisions or why the president and his advisors made those decisions. The glaring one is one of the former Minister for Agriculture. That is glaring, straightforward. Okay? But the others, remember, we also have to take into account reshuffles that often take place within government.
Yeah.
And sometimes it has to do with probably just figuring out who is the best fit. Somebody is given a task, and when you look at the qualities and the docket, they have to figure, no, these qualities and the way they're being run would be better suited in this place. Yes. So let's take them there.
And I think also there was the element of, look, we're not going to try and look for anybody new. We're going to work with what we have right now. Also probably looking at the element of time playing a major factor here in terms of the time as per this administration. But to say, look, with what we have, who would be better fit? Because we must understand those initial appointments for which there was a reshuffle were made by the same gentlemen who felt that they could actually do the job. Having found out, okay, folks, this is not working, let's see how we can move things around a little bit. Again, because of character, because of non-performance, or because of fantastic performance, we saw that there was a move. Again, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to see fantastic results or move us, but it is the hope that that is what would be.
It is. I mean, let's take, for instance, someone like Muntai Kagwe. He actually worked for this media house at some point in his life in a fairly senior position. Now, health, and given the landmines that we've seen being erected in terms of NHIF not working, rolling out something that was piloted without any clear direction as to what the pilot actually brought out, that thing, just apart from just implementing what was required, it'll require communication knowledge. Somebody who actually, understands the media, knows what ought to be done. Somebody who can highlight the achievement, talk about what needs to be done, meaning get this thing into perspective. Because if you ask me right now, and you talk about the Ministry of Health, whether it is the devolved aspect of it or whether it's at the national level, we still have a problem.
Oh, absolutely. Even if
then it goes down to not just the level of the CS. Look at it from the level of the PS as well and the senior managers of health in the ministry. So if you're not reshuffling those, clearly...
Why? You see, that one, once the minister comes in, all right, there are certain levels of employees that the minister can actually reshuffle. He does not require presidential assent.
President, yes.
Yes, he doesn't.
But you need to look at the PS. Because there are some cases where the president has actually moved around PSs. He's moved around one PS from here. Coletta Suda has moved from higher education to another one. We have the one for TVET who's been moved. There are reasons for that. And maybe you have performed so well that this one now can be taken off by somebody else and go and sort out for me this other area. But if you're saying that one of the reasons why I'm moving as CS is because I feel that the ministry is not being run well, then the CS is not alone. The accounting officer, just like the Senate Speaker has told us, is the PS.
You know, sometimes when we talk about something not being done well, the immediate assumption, if it's Kenyan, is that something untoward like misappropriation of funds is taking place. Sometimes someone has just been given a docket that they can't actually handle well. It's not that they're incompetent, but that particular docket is something that they cannot handle well. And they may do better, infinitely better, in a totally different docket. So that is also a consideration that must be borne in mind. Remember, health isn't one of these static ministries where anything that is of importance happens once a year. It is a mobile, fluid, moving object on a daily basis. And with everything that happens in the country, health always comes in. Now, if you start from the point of view that the optimal funding that is intended for health and which was made with the Abuja Declaration has actually never been achieved. Let's start there.
Yep.
Then it means health needs already are below par. The meeting of them below par. Now, someone who is able to juggle what is available to ensure that these needs are now met. Because resources are always limited. It doesn't matter what you say.
Right.
We're always working with what we have and what is available.
Yeah.
Now, if the previous minister has shown that with whatever efforts they were making, somehow things seem to get worse, not better, then you'd say, no, let's do this. Remember, prior to this, we did have a minister who had a health background, exactly a medical doctor. He was, I think, asked to perhaps employ his skills elsewhere again at some point.
Yeah, there was a medical doctor who was a PS. And
remember, and he had been CEO.
Expert.
He had been a CEO at Nairobi Hospital. So I think it was felt, but wait.
This guy should know what to do.
Yes.
This was the general sentiment, yes.
The gentleman who had been a former banker, if I'm to read, I believe what I read, seemed to have done a far better job than this gentleman. Doctor. Yes, because this isn't a job that requires your medical knowledge. It actually requires your management skills.
Management skills.
Yes. Primarily your management skills.
And if you've managed a hospital, that's a health system.
We hoped that would be the case. The ministry, I think, came with challenges that perhaps the management of a hospital like Nairobi Hospital, maybe a ministry is a huge thing.
Juggling the politics of it as well.
Yes, it's a huge thing, and there's politics to be involved. A banker would be perhaps far more equipped to deal with things like politics than perhaps someone who has a medical background.
I think it's also, of course, the hue and cry comes in many occasions that, this is a huge responsibility that's been placed on my shoulders. Because, like we said, the ministry is not a small thing. Huge responsibility that you have. To understand it, first of all, we just talked about, in the previous hour, we talked about comprehension of really these duties that you have been given and really understand what it then takes to get this job done. And I think, unfortunately, that is what we saw. The lack of understanding of really then how much of a responsibility then you bear on your shoulders to run a ministry in this country. And then we look at what you then call really center stage ministries, health, defense, even something like foreign affairs, finance, and to say, okay, with those folks, we're not looking at some run-of-the-mill, just an 8-to-5 job. You're essentially running the country by sector. And to say then that, okay, this is a little bit too much for me, I think in a lot of cases is the problem. Not that they don't know their trade, but the responsibility then becomes quite heavy, then they're not able to expend their duties. Or the understanding then of what they must do then is not clear for them how to do this. And I think, again, a glaring example of that is these two ministries where we've seen people moved, where things were suffering. Health and agriculture. Big things here where it was evident to everybody. You cannot continue to have day in, day out, something is wrong. And then again, the finger is pointed back at you. So now for the chief executive to come and say, all right, the way in which this has been going, we cannot allow it to go any further. Of course, says two things. One, I want this country to succeed. And secondly, I'm not going to allow someone who then doesn't understand their roles and responsibilities to continue to sit in this position. And of course, there's number three. I want to, of course, inject some kind of hope into the people of Kenya to say that we have a handle on these things. Not to worry. Okay, you've seen that things have not been going right.
But we've got to do something about it.
Let's change it. And let's see what then we can get out of that. But then, of course, realizing that within the administration, for which, whether we like it or not, President Uhuru Kenyatta is definitely trying to mark out a legacy. It cannot fail. And his intent is not to, is not to let this fail, whatever it is.
Looking at then the way you're saying that some of these changes are actually just to reinvigorate and to bring fresh hope and fresh impetus into how operations are running. Industrialization, having somebody who was a PS being elevated to CS, and then somebody who has actually worked in this sector of manufacturing for long, worked with the Association of Manufacturers, understands the private sector, understands their pain point. This, I can see the hope in that. In fact, I can see this one is not among those that where you're saying that it does not guarantee results. I think here we have guaranteed results coming out.
Oh yeah, that's exactly. I think
I am seeing that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's split across the board.
Having served as PS for those number of years, then she's gotten the experience of how the government works, and now she's rising to the level of CS. She should be able to make it work.
Yeah, which is why I said that.
Betty Minor.
And that's why I said it's split across board, because in some cases it's clear that you had some people, there were three things we said here: it's not working, move. Or it is working, so here be elevated. Or, okay, it's not working so much, you can't handle this, then move to this. Let's try you elsewhere. And I think that was threefold in all of this, because we then see examples across board of all. And to definitely say yes, because you've applied yourself so well in this sector and we've seen that is working, here is a sector that needs help. Please come and see if you can make it work there. I think is where your guarantee would then come.
Actually, no. In politics, these appointments don't. That's one way of looking at it. But remember, just aside from balancing things, tribally, yes, good word, that one, tribally in the country, there are also things you need to take into account as to what has, you've said it, what has happened in that docket before. For instance, water and sanitation. Water and sanitation has looked after the interest of things like dams. And we know how that has gone. All right. Now, there was a docket that was empty. With the attorney in finance, labor that had been his previous docket was empty. So the gentleman who was in charge of water and sanitation has been taken there. So Cicely Kariuki now takes over this. So in that respect, what you're saying is absolutely true.
Which is what?
Which is something has gone wrong here. Let's put somebody who I think can set this thing right. All right? That could be true. But it would also fit in with the qualities that are known. Remember when someone was given that job of CS, there was something that was indicated as to their ability and capability at some point. That's why, because of all the people you could give that job, there are many, this person was given. There was a reason. So now moving them is to perhaps cement that reason that actually this person actually is capable. Let us put her here, or let's put them there, and then you will see exactly.
You'll see what I wanted
in the first place. You will actually see this thing. Yes, they'll set things right.
Cecily Kariuki was actually brought to the health ministry at that point where there were many issues. The health scandal, the mafia, right? Remember the mafia house scandal, where the containers at the port.
Those containers actually went to the mental unit that we have.
Yep. And they're in use. Are they not?
No. Not that I know of.
Okay. But they moved from the port.
They moved to the port. And then remember the last time when the media highlighted the issue, the complaint was that a lot of the equipment that had been those units were now in a complete state of disuse.
Yeah.
So I doubt very much. It was just that particular government property probably had the space where you could actually put them.
Go and store them.
Yes, exactly. Kenyatta doesn't. All right, no, actually, Kenyatta does.
It does have a lot.
No, even just as I thought, I said, no, it does.
What?
Kenyatta actually has, but that's where they put it. Now, again, remember.
But you could say that maybe she was brought in there to clean up some of this mess.
She was, and
ensure that the kind of perception that the public has on the health ministry is sorted, is resolved, is brought to.
During Cecily Kariuki's tenure, there is really no huge scandal that you can say
that has come out of
that
rocks
ministry.
The health.
You cannot. There have been issues like there would be issues in any ministry, but something like that, no, not really.
You haven't heard.
Not really.
You haven't heard.
The billions that kept being lost in a previous administration were not heard of at all.
And actually, if you think about when there was that issue of meat being laced with the sodium metabisulfite,
yes,
and the kind of reaction that was taken by the Ministry of Health, Cecily Kariuki herself being on the front line of updating the public, saying we have conducted raids, we have seen this is what is happening, we can now assure you that your meat is safe. Having somebody maybe at that point, that's why she's being taken to a ministry like water and sanitation, where you're feeling, we have had issues. Remember, even irrigation had to be hived off this ministry and taken to agriculture.
We can look at it that way. We can also look at it in the sense that, here we have the Big Four agenda, and the president has not been shy on harping the importance of this thing. We must do it. Regardless of how you want to look at it, everybody's got to be on board for this. And then to take health from one step to the next, he needed somebody who was going to push
fresh energy.
Absolutely. And said, New Year's Day, he again was talking about this, whereby it was supposed to be an injection of energy into the people and say, okay, we have a certain time left. But the Big Four agenda took center stage of his speech on that day. And it has been very clear, even with making sure that the necessary budgets for this project came out. And to say that, yes, we've done a pilot project for a year. Next year, we're going to roll this thing out. And here we have rollout for 2020. It was clear that he needed somebody who was going to take the wheel and move this vehicle. And I think that also contributed to the move that we see. Because yes, she was able to mop things up here and there. But in terms of lurching forward and moving forward with the UHC, obviously, we can see that, there was some want there.
Remember in the foreign affairs, there's something that has been in the offing for some time. The Kenyan quest to have a seat as an unpermanent member in the Security Council. And our competitor is Djibouti, whom China seemed to have decided to support wholeheartedly. Now, there's a gentleman called, I think his name is John Weru, if I don't get it right, Johnson Weru?
Johnson Weru.
Yes, Johnson Weru was the individual, one of the key personalities who was actually behind in the Foreign Affairs Ministry, the push to have our position cemented here. Now, again, these movements that we see may very well reflect that particular push that we had. And once again, Monica Juma has also, I believe, had a stint in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's not as though she's totally total neophyte and someone who didn't understand what happens.
She's
there.
Ambassador Monica Juma. She's
yes, exactly.
As an ambassador.
So she has. So when you're dealing with such matters, again, you will want someone who in the recent past has probably had that sort of experience, because again, that enables her to have had connections and contacts. In short, someone who in doing the job will start from a position of advantage, meaning she has been in this place before. Remember, Rachel Omamo had been an ambassador, but in a previous time, a little while back in the Kibaki era, all right, and an ambassador. Now, Monica Juma was an ambassador in a more recent time. So again,
so she started it, but then she's been moved. And then you also talking about Johnson Wero, who was head of the diplomatic training,
has been moved.
Has also been moved to trade.
Yes, he has. Remember, one of the things that you cannot remove from trade is the foreign influence. Because trade actually involves very, very directly people who are not within your country.
It's not local.
No. It's not Wakulima market. It is something to do with other people and how you generate an income from doing business with them. So somebody who has experience in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it would make perfect sense to put that person in the Ministry of Trade. Perfect sense.
We continue the conversation as we take a look at what's happening on the roads. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Nduoko is taking a look at what happened yesterday in terms of cabinet appointments and the reshuffle, the movement of CSs and PSs from one ministry or department to another. And she's saying, well, in some cases, people may expect that this means that we have guaranteed results, but not in all cases. In very many cases, what maybe the leadership may be wanting to do is to inject fresh impetus, fresh hope that this is actually going to be actualized. The programs of the government are going to come to light because there's fresh hope there, new pair of eyes, new pair of hands, new fresh pair of legs coming in. That's the conversation we're having. We'll be opening up the phone lines shortly at 0719-012-600. That's 0719-012-600. Always continue contributing to the conversation on Spice FM KE Facebook, Spice FM KE Twitter. Good morning, 24 to 9.
Online, on digital, and on radio. This is Spice FM. Traffic.
Okay, yes, so we have traffic situations all across the city. Let's take a hop over to Mombasa and see what it looks like now. Not much throughout the town, and it seems to be flowing smoothly in and out of the town. Looking at Kisumu City right now, all the way to the airport from right in the CBD, no issues there whatsoever. Traffic has definitely staved off. Here in Nairobi, however, Mombasa Road, Langata Road, Ngong Road, Waiyaki Way, Thika Road, there's traffic everywhere you look. So today is the day when you can use the bypasses, the southern bypass, the eastern bypass, serving up positive vibes for you today, and you don't have to go far to look for an alternate route. Industrial area is actually behaving very well today. Not much in terms of issues. Let's see what it looks like in about half an hour, but for now it's all right. Be patient, you'll get there eventually. Of course, it is what we call traffic hour until about 9 o'clock. We'll give you more details as we can. If you see any incidents or accidents that we need to let people know about, Spice FM KE is the Twitter handle. Let us know what you see or give us a call, 0719-012-600.
96.1 Spice FM. Kisi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
This is a coach deciding to basically make substitutions in the middle of the game.
Yeah.
And deciding, well, this is what I need to see. I need to have a fresh pair of legs to also encourage the other team players who are out on the pitch.
Well, that's the nice, kind view. As a very close friend of mine has just corrected me and said, please remember, it is often a game of musical chairs.
That's what I said.
That is actually used to just release steam.
I like your friend.
And give the impression that something is actually changing, where in reality not very much has changed. That's his perspective.
It's the same chairs, it's the same folks playing the game in some cases. And then if you want to, again, use the same sports analogy, even when you make a substitution, it doesn't guarantee the win. All right? You're hoping that with the fresh legs or the fresh perspective that things would change.
At least the players on the pitch see that the coach is watching what we are playing, how we are playing, and has brought in somebody who can help us on that one side. And we feel encouraged to move. Or maybe he also tells you, now let's change the formation. By changing formation, he's saying we were playing 4-3-3 or 4-3-2. Now let's change it to whatever, a new formation. Maybe this is what is happening. we are at this point, maybe like yesterday, CT was telling us the Jubilee government has started implementing very many of its promises. It's just saying now, guys, let's just finish. All right, let's manage this game.
Well, at least in this case, this is what I'm saying.
We're doing well. Let's manage the game. Let's
even
finish.
Even if we don't win, let us finish well. That's where we're saying, okay, so now at least let's keep moving forward. There's nothing. You want to move forward. You don't want to move back, or even worse, you don't want to stay in the same position, because if things remain the way they are right now in this country, it's terrible. It shouldn't be the case. We need things to be moving, right? So even if it doesn't guarantee that we will win, everybody with trophies standing at the end, at least we are going to do better. And I think that's the hope that's being injected in people, being injected in Kenyans, to say, all right, things have changed a little bit. Whereas on other occasions, we may have seen political reshuffle or cabinet reshuffles as a result of some kind of political influences. In this case, I really see a different kind of reshuffle.
You don't think there's any political balancing act?
Of course there is. Of course there is. However, I think that here,
it was not the motivation.
The overriding factor would be that things were running amok in a lot of cases, and we needed to get some redirection. And that was clear.
Actually, the political statements in these issues, I think, tend to override probably everything else. And why do I say this? For instance, people had wondered and asked the question, I mean, this Ministry of Agriculture, man, these problems just never end. And
it's not one thing, it's the other.
I mean, and they get bigger. What? So, the what has been responded to. So, at least, and if you ask me from a political perspective, it's a good response.
This is it.
Well, you have complained. We've seen the problem.
I've heard you.
Here.
Is the coach, however, hearing everything that the spectators are saying?
I think
we
the coach hears everything,
Eric. Maybe the spectators are actually saying, no, don't just remove this one, also remove the other, remove 3 or 4. But the coach has just removed one. Is it placating the audience? Is the audience feeling sufficient?
If you remove 3 at once, the people, your audience will expect you to remove 6 the next time.
Yes.
Remove 1. Give it time.
Plus, there's a reason why the coach is the coach.
Yes, remove another one.
It's his decision.
Yes, believe me, progress is seen.
We have paid to get into this stadium. We expect to see results.
Exactly, and progress, when should we say enacted in this sort of installments, has greater effect. It shows that something is being done continuously.
There's movement.
If 3 people are moved within a period of say 4 months, the effect and the optics are much better than if 4 are removed at a go.
At a go.
Yes. Because then it shows that it's continuing. At a go, they'll say, but it was just once, and then the guy's doing nothing.
And then you also inject you let people know that you are you bear this watchdog status over time. Not just that, okay, something needs to be done, boom, we've done it, and then we continue.
And then go back to sleep.
No. Over time, you continue to watch the progress, and then you say, are we doing okay? We have a handle on things? Yes, all right, let's move a little bit more. Or that, okay, things are still not working, all right, let's topple things here a little bit and rejig things once again. You also give people that kind of assurance that you are aware of everything that is happening.
It's also a vote of confidence on some individuals. So if you look at the individuals, for example, who were carried over from the previous regime into this one, and they're not affected at all. For example, looking at Fred Matiang'i, of course, Najib Balala, James Macharia, Rachel Omamo. These are people who are CSs in Uhuru 1, and now they're in Uhuru 2, and they haven't been moved. It's basically saying, I trust these people. These ones are carrying
some were even in the
Kibaki
in the Kibaki era,
and they're still being retained in this particular one. So it's basically saying, I trust these people. These are the people who are holding my legacy together. They are the ones who I expect to deliver the legacy. So apart from one of them just being given the legacy project, this is the James Macharia. The others are all new of the 4 legacy projects. Housing is James Macharia. We have industrialization. Now it has had Peter Munya. Now it's going to have Betty Maina. We have agriculture. Now it has Peter Munya. It had Kionjori. Health. It has had how many? It has had now it has had
quite a number.
Now it has a new entrant into this particular administration.
Yes.
What are we saying basically? So yes, he has people that he trusts. These are my core. These ones, I will carry them. Amina Mohammed and the others, I will stay with them. But I would expect that these ones are the people who would actually be working on the legacy projects.
Who?
The people that he trusts?
The core, yes.
So what I hear you saying, Eric, is that there's a dream team.
Can I go through the list of Uhuru's dream team or Uhuru's core team
or people who have
survived.
They've been through
since 2013. They've survived. Fred Matiang'i, number one. Najib Balala, James Macharia, Rachel Amamo, Amina Mohammed, Aidan Mohammed. Those. Because Eugene Omalo came in later. Charles Kater came in later. Joe Mushero, was he from the beginning? At some point, came in later. Margaret Kobia came in later. Monica Juma was not a CS at that point. Simon Chalugui came in later. Kerioko Tobiko, new term. Farida Karunei, new term. Ukuri Atani, new term. George Magoha, new term. Mutahi Kagwe, nominee. Betty Maina, nominee. You see, so the core is those first four that I read, the first 5 or 6. And those ones have remained. That means the president has trust and confidence that they are doing a good job.
Not necessarily.
Why can't he
There are
remove
people who may just have a political purpose and they're not causing any harm.
They're not really causing a dent in anything. So why move them?
What do you mean?
All right.
If they're not performing,
no.
For political
it's not
reasons.
that they're not performing. There's nothing spectacular they're doing. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Okay, I know you're going to ask. Give me an example, all right? So I
preempt.
Yes, I'm preempting, and I will give you an example. If you look, for instance, at say our Ministry of say Industrialization, who was there before?
Aidan has been there.
Yes. Now, the one thing that particular ministry has complained of is the cost of power, continuously, and they said, whatever it is that we do, the cost of production is being affected by this cost of power, right?
Yep.
And it therefore means that whatever we have at the end of the game is actually going to be expensive and doesn't need to be.
Yep.
One complaint, right? But again, industrialization is not just about power. It's about managing whatever situation you have with whatever resources you have, all right? And also managing the relationship between people who are involved in that sector. And industrialization, the entire sector is actually private. Now, what do you do? This is where the optics comes in. Betty Maina, competent. Her background, faultless when you talk about Kenya Association of Manufacturers, PS, all that. Put her in that docket, people say, okay, now, we now have a minister.
We have one of our own.
One of our own, somebody who actually understands this thing. Good. All right? Excellent choice, and it fits the bill when we're talking about all those things. Again, because of that background that we spoke of. Now, if you look at why Adan was CEO of Barclays at some point. Was he not in this country? So people felt. But again, Macharia was also CEO of another bank, which is also substantial.
Yep.
Okay? Now, why were these people chosen? Because it is said they had a track record of good performance. Wherever they had come from. And it was said they would manage. And they actually haven't let... There's nothing that you can say that is untoward to say that they have actually let down the appointment or the appointing authority. That's as far as these things go. Sometimes there's nothing spectacular that someone does, but neither have they done something
terrible.
Yes, exactly. So essentially, you could argue they're just doing their job. Chew on that one.
Okay, let me chew on it. 13 minutes to 9 o'clock. This is a Situation Room. Let's open up the phone lines for the next 13 minutes. 0719 012600. That's 0719 012600. Your opinion, your views on the cabinet reshuffle. They move what you're calling musical chairs. It's basically just moving people from one docket to another. What impact is it likely to have on the President Kenyatta's administration's plans and legacy going forward? 0719 012600. Call in.
Spice FM. Nyeri. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Sunright. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
It's not guaranteeing the performance, it's not guaranteeing results, but it's adding
Mornings
pressure,
done right.
Hope.
94.
Losing hope in the population.
Right.
That we are doing something. And we're going to make sure that we achieve what we promised that we're going to achieve. We're going to make sure that we have things working. PS has also been moved. For example, in education docket. So we had several PSs. Belio Kipsang of basic education still remains. Professor Colette Suda, who was dealing with the higher education, was replaced by Simon Nabukwesi.
You want to ask yourself why?
Yeah.
At this point, you're saying, okay, because of course, I think you can also look at several factors that came into play. Of course, we're looking at the enrollment for students who took the KCPE then in Form 1. And we even had this debate yesterday. How would it affect her?
Yes.
She's in charge of higher. Basic is from 1 to Form Standard 1 to Form 4.
I understand that, but KCPE moves that you go to Form 1, which is higher education. Yeah, it's secondary school.
It's still basic.
Okay, also saying basic. Okay, fine.
So she's in university. So it's after.
Yes, that's what higher education is in this country. But she's moved to gender.
She's been taken to gender.
Yes.
Impact of that. How is that actually making you feel that, well, yeah, we have...
What exactly does the gender ministry handle?
So the gender ministry handles the issues of gender.
Give him a moment.
He has given me a moment. All right.
Like, what else do you expect them to handle? It's public service and gender. Remember, it had public service, youth, and gender. Youth has been hived off now, taken to ICT, innovation, and youth. Because they wanted to align in terms of youth and ICT go hand in hand. Youth innovation hand in hand. This is where the youth demographic is likely to tap in a lot of benefits from. So when you bring in now gender, and you have Professor Colette Suda, who has for the longest been in education and university education, higher education, I don't know what kind of fresh energy, fresh hope you're injecting into this. I don't know. Or maybe you're injecting fresh hope.
Actually, if you think about it, the gender discussion tends to take very heated space when we talk of employment in this country. Now, if you're talking about higher education, talking university and institutions of higher learning, then what you're saying is this particular pot is where these issues are cooked. People are trained, and when they're trained, they're released into the work environment. Now, somebody who, theoretically speaking here, from a layman's perspective, that if someone has managed that particular ministry, surely something like gender, where you are looking at this balancing act of gender and the role therein, I would argue she's very suited.
But of course, when we're looking at gender, then we're looking at balancing, and then we're looking at parity, and we're looking at things like gender-based violence. We're looking at several things across the board that need quite a lot in terms of implementation and policy making, and then making sure that, a lot of these policies then go from theory to enactment and practice. Then, of course, you want somebody who has practical knowledge of project management and things like that. And it's clear that maybe she in this place would be able to do that. My point being that I think that these appointments were not just, pieces of paper thrown in a hat and then juggle them up and say, come out and place you here. But I think they were actually given some thought that by the time this move is being made, not necessarily because they have, we've already established that some individuals were put at a position, not because they had any kind of sector knowledge, but they had management skills that they would then be able to apply. And so it's clear that these were given thought. But at the same time, that thought being given was clear that, we wanted to see how we could rejig things and make it work a little better. Look at the gender debate that has taken center stage in this country for years, and look at things that have not been implemented in this country. So you're looking at somebody maybe who is level-headed and is going to push an agenda that is where you want the country to be. So, of course, someone with higher education knowledge, somebody with higher education experience, definitely someone who is versed in management of projects and making sure that policies are actually established and enacted.
Maybe she was moved so to accommodate somebody who's been moved from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Remember, there has been serious movement in that Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We've talked about Johnson Wairo, who has been nominated to be PS for Trade. He was in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, championing the country's candidature for the non-permanent seat of the UN Security Council, right? Now, the replacement for Professor Colette Suda at the University Education PS department is also somebody who's coming from the Foreign Affairs Ministry. This is Simon Nabukwesi. Nabukwesi is a specialist in education planning and development, public relations, strategic management, and foreign relations. He was a long-serving director of the Foreign Service Academy. Last year, he had been moved to be the director of the Europe and Commonwealth in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this is somebody else also from Foreign Affairs taken to another department. Probably it's just to accommodate, because we need to do something about this MFA. There are very many issues at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So let's like you said, CT, release the pressure. Probably the pressure here was Foreign Affairs Ministry, children are eating their own.
Well,
people eating their own
People are eating their children.
People eating their children.
Macharia Kamau hasn't moved.
The PS.
So there's an indication that, well, he's had a long career in the foreign service. So there's indication that he seems to know what he's doing. Otherwise, he would have been the first to be moved.
So you guys get out. Let these ones work.
Well, of course, with things like MFA, he's been stable in his career, and you want some with your foreign affairs for a country, you want stability.
He has experience, of course, having worked in the UN as the representative of the UN. So in terms of even this push for the UN Security Council seat, he was fundamental in that fight. Yeah. Let's take some calls from Mombasa. Solomon, good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
About the movement of the cabinet, for me, particularly on the Kionjori issue, you see, agriculture is a very sensitive docket that people maybe sometimes we assume. And you see, the Jubilee Party, majority of people who voted for Jubilee Party come from the Kalenjin and the Kikuyu community, the central, and these regions are where people grow food. So if this person did not articulate the major issues comes to maize, tea, coffee, potatoes and everything, that thing will give a headache to the president. And that's the reason why at any given time, the president can shuffle and count the docket of agriculture as many times as possible. Because you see, when people are hungry, they'll never hear you.
Yeah.
And for me,
it was important. So do you feel that bringing in Peter Munya into this docket
yes,
serves the president well?
It serves the president. First of all, you see, for agriculture, you have to bring someone who has a political goodwill. You have to balance this thing. Someone who is, and even the Kibaki era, you have to choose someone who is in those areas. It was Ruto during the Kibaki era, the Grand Coalition. You put in Ruto because he comes from that region. Someone who understands the dynamics of our stomach. Yeah, so that.
Yeah.
For example, if you put someone maybe from the eastern region, for him he or she is used to donations. You know, someone who usually grows these crops. Because that's
Solomon, tread carefully. You talked about stomach.
Let's stick with the stomach.
Yes,
yes. The donations bit may rub people the wrong way, sir. So let's continue the stomach issue.
Yeah, let me just withdraw that statement. So the best way is to bring someone who has political power and who comes from there, who understands the dynamics of farming, especially things that perfectly direct, especially that is maize, tea, eggs, and milk, something that we consume each and every day.
On a daily basis.
It's very sensitive.
Thank you, Solomon. Thank you very much.
And
he's raising some good points there, in talking about why agriculture is an important docket. Looking at Peter Munya, and Peter Munya being brought here, he's a politician, so he understands the politics of this. He served as a governor. He also knows the politics of farmers. He was the governor of Meru. He understands the politics of farmers. He has served this. He has tried to balance it out. Is he going to bring in some fresh energy into the ministry?
Well, he has energy to begin with. Remember, he was governor. That says
a lot,
a great deal about his abilities as a politician. That's one. The area he comes from, agriculture is the mainstay of a lot of what happens within that particular region. So again, if you're talking about his understanding of agriculture, he would. But even his knowledge base and of politics and what needs to be done in any docket, I think he does.
He brings that to the table as well.
He has shown that he understands how to balance these things. That's why he's actually where he is. Yes. How many people do you know of who stopped being governors, who transitioned into being in any position in government?
In government.
Yes. So there must be something that this gentleman has, and it's a unique ability that not many people have. We had the former governor of Bungoma here. Again, it's unique. He transitioned quite well.
Ukur Yatani has transitioned from being governor to the man in charge of the money.
Of the money, the national purse. There you go, right under his armpits.
Yes. The conversation continues on our social media platforms, Spice FM KE, Facebook, and on Twitter at Spice FM KE. Remember, our hashtag is The Situation Room. You can also tag us individually at CT Muga, at Nduoko, at Eric Latif. Good morning. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting from Nairobi on 94.4. We are in Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, Malindi. We are also worldwide. www.spicefm.co.ke. Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads at 9 o'clock. Good morning.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. Spice FM.
Spice up your life. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Traffic.
Traffic staving off in most parts of the city today. That means that it's looking a little better off Mombasa Road, getting down into the CBD. However, now everybody's converging in the CBD. Let's see that it'll hopefully people will be getting out so that it's easy for those who are coming in to maneuver their way. Still a bit of a parking lot situation on Langata Road, folks. You're not moving as fast as you want to, but then you have the option of getting through to the Timor roundabout and on towards Nyayo Stadium, or using Bagavi Way then to approach the City Mortuary roundabout. There I can give you those two alternates. Coming off of Wayaki Way, looking a little bit better as you get into the city centre, and Kiambu Road not looking as bad as it was half an hour ago. So much better, folks. We bring the good news this Wednesday morning. Send us what you see. Spice FM KE on Twitter, or give us a call 0719 012 600.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have CT Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Oko, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latif, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
It's 2 minutes past 9 o'clock. Good morning. This is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. If you're in Malindi, we're on 97.7. You'll be calling in onto this conversation as we proceed. 0719 012 600. In the room this morning, my name is Eric Latif. We have Nduoko and City Muga.
Well, Eric, I'm back to work, aren't I?
It's day one for CT.
This is day one.
This is day one. In the last few weeks, what has dominated our media, well, it's been overtaken by this mention of reshuffles within government, but the BBI 2022 politics, it has dominated our thoughts. And it has been presented in that manner, the BBI, its pluses and minuses. The 22 race for the president with people declaring their candidacy, some governors, the DP. That list is going to grow with the passage of time. And that it has dominated the media, it means the media has given it dominance. And when the media gives something dominant, something of this nature, and if it's political, then it automatically falls in the realm of political reporting. Now, this doesn't always represent the truth. It represents part of the truth, a perspective of the truth. Take, for instance, when you say that Ruto versus Uhuru and Raila, and then you read whatever the content is, you're not talking about something that is not entirely true, but it isn't entirely true. The issue here isn't that it is Ruto against Uhuru or Ruto against Raila. No. The reality is there is a presidential race that some people have declared an interest in, and everything they are doing and every utterance they are doing is geared towards ensuring that that particular end of achieving that goal of being president of this country is achieved. And it isn't just one person playing it. Anyone who has declared has at one point or the other done something that brings them to the limelight of the country. It's whether they are declaring that somebody's about to murder them, or that they are declaring somebody else is about to murder them, or declaring that somebody else who is not the else is trying to murder them, or some harm. The latest was the deputy governor of Kisumu, who said that people are out to harm him because of his unwavering support for the DP. So again, it goes back to one of the principals who's considered as a key contender for the presidential post in 2022. But when you talk about political journalism, you really have to understand that there's an end that it seeks to achieve, and there's the ideal end that it actually ought to achieve. Quite aside from informing, it actually ought to give people certain facts about the situation that they keep reporting about. For instance, let's talk about the 2022 presidential race. You can't talk about it without going 3 presidential races prior to it to understand the dynamics that even brought these particular players that we have into the places they're in, where now they are supposedly the key contenders. You have to look into that. Some of this is sometimes presented, but not all of it. Sometimes there is a gap in information, and that's what I'm referring to. Sometimes it isn't even a gap in information. It is, according to them, people reporting who don't understand the research element that is required in actually discussing something of this sort. And so there will be an information gap, simply because political science that plays a major role in understanding the thinking behind these things and the actual enactment have not been taken into consideration. And this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that with this sort of reporting, political journalism in this country then represents itself as an alternate world and not necessarily the one in which we live in.
This is where that gentleman from Washington would call fake news.
The gentleman from Washington.
This one actually isn't fake news. This is what you'd call faking the news. The news actually exists, but there's an element of that news that isn't entirely
That is being
true.
skewed.
Yes.
To give a certain impression. Or
Strongly skewed in a certain direction.
Donald Trump would call that fake news any day.
A source of information of reference of my liking, I wouldn't put Donald Trump at the top of that.
Unfortunately, you've headed that direction, CT.
I have headed in that direction, and I thank you for bringing that gentleman to the conversation. I merely said I wouldn't use him as a strong reference point. The only reference that I would give to him as being the person who is a forerunner and a leader in that particular department of fake news. That's what I would place it. That's where I would place him.
Anyway, what we read is the alternate reality.
What is presented to us is the alternate reality.
What is the
which
reality?
Which seems to represent a certain agenda.
What is the reality?
I have to be specific.
Do we have candidates gunning for 2022?
Let's start with: is there an election that we purport or we feel will be had in 2022? The answer is yes. Is it the first time we've had a presidential election?
No.
The answer is no. Do we have many contenders for that post? Yes. And why is it that this particular race seems to have acquired momentum and heat much earlier than probably any other that we've had in the recent past? Those are the questions I would ask, and then proceed from that point onwards.
No, the thing is, so you've said all those things. So none of them is fake, is false. All of what you've said is true. There's an election coming up. There are people who have declared their candidacy. There are people who are already, positioning themselves as the forerunners, the front runners of this. Mm-hmm. That is what is being reported. What is alternate reality about that?
Alternate reality is this. No one is telling you that what is being hyped here is something that is actually the bedrock on which most of our political activities are based. Movements within political parties, movements within political positions, movements within political support, normal. How many articles have you read that come out and tell the reader that, this thing, much as you see it, it's normal. This is what happens all the time.
Right.
No, not should. It happens all the time.
I can't think
why
of
do you
one
need to be
actually.
told this happens all the time?
Because
most people don't actually
most people
understand
don't know, not even understand. are not aware, CT, that this is the case, that this is normal for it to happen. How many people do you think you'd be able to walk into, except for those maybe who have an internal understanding or knowledge of the fact that you see a lot of the rumblings that we've seen politically, because we're coming to a time where party elections are going to be held. I'll give you another example out of Kenya. Many people don't know, okay, Trump wants to go to war with Iran, for example. Many people don't also realize that, number one, he's trying to cement his position as the leader who would save America and make it great again, coming up to an election in 2020, or at the same time trying to avoid a conviction at the Senate. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's very rare that that would be reported. Actually, folks, what is really happening here is the possibility of 1, 2, and 3. It's very rare that such reports
The analysis. This analysis happens. CT, you've quoted political science. So political scientists are also brought into this news. They participate. They take part in this.
I quoted them in this context.
What you do on this show every morning, CT, is actually just giving us that perspective and saying, you know what you're seeing now is we saw a similar kind of thing happening 20, 30 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and this is what was happening. It was political realignment. So what you see is political realignment. And
you see,
the political reporting has not said it is new or it's unique.
Political reporting on a daily basis, in the absence of perspective, which is what analysis brings about, tends to be biased. It's happening today. But today, sometimes is best understood with yesterday in mind and the day before in mind.
Yeah.
That's where now opinion shaping or opinion giving or opinion journalism, which is actually based on understanding. You talked about political scientists. I actually brought in the issue of political scientists from this point of view, that often there's an absence of that particular consideration, political science, and how the theories around it actually shape this particular form of journalism. Because reporting has to also inform. But if you lack the information or knowledge of the larger picture, your information will not only be skewed, but it will be half-baked. So, what you will report, for instance, which we are fed on, is the tribal element of our politics. That we don't even need to tell us, we understand it. That people understand. But the nuances, that the differences aren't actually real. How often do you hear it being mentioned? That these political differences, which only rear their heads every 5 years, strongly so. The uniqueness of what we're hearing now is a politicization of a process that began from 2017. And both parties played a role in it. It isn't as though one particular political party led the role. No. It was politicking from a disputed election, and it continued. Stopped at the handshake. Renewed vigor when other issues came in, because now it looks like, wait, the playing field has changed. There's a new entrant into this twosome. We now have a threesome. No. So politics played in. 2022 came into being again. So every discussion around it, whether it's BBI, whether it's what, even what we were discussing about the moving around of ministers and PSs, you will not complete that discussion without talking about political alignment. So it's politics everywhere.
Yes.
But the reporting that I'm speaking of is one that, on the one hand, states what's happening, but then gives you a background from which you can understand it. So in that way, you inform and you provide clarity. That's what I'm saying.
Give me an example of we had a headline, the headline they've just quoted, right? The headline of it's Ruto versus the president and the former prime minister.
All right.
Let
me
what
give
kind
you
of
perspective.
Because it's been reported that this is what's happening, and it goes back into what's the genesis of this. The genesis of this is the BBI. The DP and the president shared a ticket. They are joined in the hip. The BBI is because the president saw that we need to close ranks and build bridges with the erstwhile opponent. And then we've gone together. And they've said these two, actually, the former prime minister and the deputy president, have worked together before. The story has already told all these things. It's given you that perspective.
The story
now,
is also in today's paper, Eric, where they said correctly that for the second time, the president has also mentioned he has changed the cabinet without the deputy president at his side, because all previous announcements were made with the deputy president at his side.
Yes.
And there is a small slight mention of perhaps it's an indication of this rift that has been reported again in the media as having existed. And I'm saying that is not the complete story. Just like when we had a member of parliament criticizing the president, it was this one I liked because there were no nuances. It was direct. she stated her mind clearly. Now, given the fact that this was a lady who was in the not too distant past, one of the most stalwart supporters of the president, you would argue and say, okay, statement was made, the understanding of it, analysis, tanga kieleweke. Okay. But I paused and asked the question, who was she addressing really? Was the president? No, not necessarily. It appeared like she was addressing the president, but she was clearly talking to an audience.
Her audience was the audience.
Her audience were people in central
Kenya, and obviously an audience that she was hoping to, if they didn't know that she was seeking their support, made it very clear by those sentiments that, at least I want you to hear me, or at least see me as an individual to be contented with.
It's what you would call positioning, meaning I am brave and bold enough to talk to the president directly and to also tell him that he has failed in X, Y, Z, and then he has failed further in X, Y, Z, and because of this, our position is X, Y, Z. Clearly.
I'm the Iron Lady.
Clearly, that's positioning. My statements, I hope, will put me in a position where you'll see me as this person who does A, B, C, D, and so I represent.
Fearless.
Yes, so I am this.
In front.
Yes. Now, we had the senator for Narok here, and we asked him a direct question, and said, in your utterances, it can be perceived that you're anti a particular community, Central Kenya. He accurately denied it, weaved about a little bit, but he denied it. All right? He was asked a second time. Again, he denied it. But his utterances are on record. Okay. Now, all I'm saying is, it is clear to me that gentleman was not addressing us. He was addressing a different audience altogether. People who, when they heard his message, would respond to it in a particular
and resonated with it, either resonated with it or rejected it.
Yes. Now, the explanation for this is, again, it could be given as 2022. But 2022 has to start somewhere with you, for instance, having a support base, meaning you have people who feel this person can represent us, and so we'll offer them our support or the numbers we have, isn't it? Now, that now is the political musical chairs that is played at that particular level. How often is it explained?
All right, so you want more explanation, more analysis on the news. When you're reporting news, get analysis. This is not how it works, but, well, let's continue the conversation. It's 16 minutes past 9. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM. Spice up your life. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
It's 18 minutes past 9 o'clock. Remember, we are live streaming on Spice FM KE, Facebook, Spice FM KE, Twitter, YouTube, and www.spicefm.co.ke. We are looking at political reporting in this hour, and that's C.T. Mugai is saying. So what we see in the political reporting in this country is a representation of the alternate reality.
Yes, I actually call it political journalism, but again, you have to just oppose it with another type of journalism called civic journalism. Now, this one is a totally different animal, and most people consider it to be very divisive. The thinking behind it and how it is presented. Now, remember, this is all news. It's just that it deals with certain aspects of our lives, and there are people who actually specialize in these things. Why do I say this? If for a week, going to 2 weeks, every other news headline is about the BBI, it's about 3 people who seem to be in opposition or in agreement, and then 2022 is mentioned, yes, but most of the time it's in the backdrop of that discussion. The question that I would ask is, okay, we've had elections before. Why is 2022 such a big thing? Because it is clearly a big thing. Why?
Well, it's not the first time. It's not the first election that's been, reported widely as this.
Hyped as this one.
Yes.
No, we've never had an election that has been more hyped than this one.
Of course, with time, elections are going to get more and more covered, right? So maybe now 2027
elections
is going
always
to be
get
different.
covered, Eric.
I mean,
2017 election was covered as widely.
Yeah, but it wasn't hyped like this one.
2013 election was covered as widely. The referendum was covered as widely.
It wasn't hyped like this one.
What is hype?
Hype is every other conversation we have, believe me, has to do with 2022. Every other.
Yes.
Look at something.
And you've told us before why.
It's interesting.
You've told us it's because we are talking about succession. Whenever we have succession issues, even in 2013, it was about 2013. We had the 2013
What does
conversation.
succession mean, actually?
That we are coming to that there's somebody who's occupying a certain seat and that person is not going to vie for that seat again. So there are many other people who are gunning for that same seat.
All right, but there's something
And
else
it's
that has come
guaranteed
into play
that
now.
there's a vacancy here.
But it's interesting that with honestly looking at this, even if you want to take a snapshot from the last 1 week, let's not even talk about what happened last year. It seems that for everything that happens, there is a political connotation to it that leads towards 2022. Look at the reshuffle that happened yesterday, and what do we have on a front page on one of the dailies? Did Uhuru sack Ruto's running mate? Obviously, this is leading to 2022.
Yes.
It seems that there was this political stories came into existence the minute the new administration was put in place. The minute Uhuru 2 came into power, 2022 was on the we were on the ballot already. It was on the agenda and we began talking about it in a manner in which we've seen it like this.
Is it manufactured?
I don't think so.
Is it manufactured or is it reality?
That people are actually looking at 2022
Yes.
and not doing the work in the interim?
Yes.
I think there's the
Because the reporting is actually, you're reporting what's reality, what's happening on the ground. When you have a meeting where the deputy president has X number of people who are
when
coming.
you have a meeting, is that the only thing happening really?
in the meeting? And this is unfortunate
What?
because
In the
you'll have many
Yes. No, it's not.
No. But you'll have
But what's
many
the major
meetings.
thing that's happening?
No. There would be that we've had headlines made out of a comment that somebody made after a meeting, before a meeting, or somebody said to somebody when they were having a cup of tea, and it was not the main agenda of what that meeting came out to be. We've had many occasions where that has happened. Or we've even had a headline that has been made out of something. The other day we talked about the headline that we saw that Ruto was locked out of his home. When you read the headline, you would think that we were talking about here in Nairobi. Until then you saw the details of the story. And of course, there was a leading towards 2022
in your
succession
mind.
policy. No, it was reported in the story.
When you saw the headline, even before you read the
That's
story.
what I'm saying. In my mind,
in your mind,
we talked
you saw
about it here.
2022.
CT said the same thing. That was what his thinking was. So you can imagine 2 people in one room. Maybe you didn't, but you can imagine now if you take that as a snapshot of what the wider population would
if you
be.
read the article. Don't
I read
don't
the
discuss-
article.
Okay, good. Now we can have the discussion.
You see? So this is what I'm saying.
I saw the headline. I read the article. Of
By
course, when
the
I saw the
time the
headline, I saw, all
article-
right, so this is slanting towards the politics of the day. And the
Of
politics of the day
course.
is guiding towards 2022. The
2022.
divisions of the top.
Yes.
Those are not manufactured realities. It's not alternate reality. It is the reality.
But we are saying that the way and manner in which this particular upcoming election
Eric, let me give you an
has been
example
highlighted
of what I mean.
It's very different from the
where
previous ones.
this political journalism is infused with what I would call civic journalism or public journalism. Page 2 of the Standard, where they say Kinjuri out as Uhuru Sheikh's cabinet dishes out billions. If you read that whole article, 2-page article, it's actually very informative. They give you a lot of information.
Yep.
They even give you a whole list of people who are there and a chart to
The new
explain
government.
this. Yes. Now, this, to me, this is now what fits the bill of what I'm saying. This is not an alternate reality. This is reality. They are reporting the present. They even give a little history of the past, bring it to the present. What they don't touch on in great detail is what it portends. They don't. But that's one you can figure out yourself if you want to figure it out. That's what we've been trying to do here this morning.
So it has already done that, all right?
Yes.
Even
Now-
the story about the education's PS moving, all
yes,
right?
yes.
And the story of all hands back as Kionjori star fades. It's talking about, all these issues. it starts bringing in the perspectives, because you've got to give it context. What's the context of the old hand of Peter Munya and Mutahi Kagwe coming in? What's the context here? Uhuru seeks to consolidate Mount Kenya backyard with reshuffle. Is that alternate reality or is that reality?
The alternate reality comes in when for weeks on end you're being bombarded with the same thing.
With the reality.
No. With part of it. This, when I say alternate, I mean there is what is the reality. But if you simply state and say, for instance, that Standard Media House is a media house that deals in media.
Thanks. But what have you said?
Exactly.
Yep.
Now, if you want to
make
it,
give it context.
You not just context, and then beef it up, and then give the perspective comes in. A little history is useful.
You don't have to say this Standard Group was started in over 100 years ago, and
there's a time when that becomes relevant.
It depends on
the
context.
time it becomes relevant for you to even say there was a time it was the leading paper in this particular country for the longest time in terms of circulation, etc., 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 etc. It's important,
and it is now.
And then you would even say, no, the nation is still that is the truth of the matter here. You're talking about journalistic circulation. The nation still has a higher circulation than the Standard in terms of print. It's just a fact. It's not speculation. It's not even news. It's just a fact.
Based on
numbers now.
Oh no.
Come on.
PDS numbers or your numbers?
Actually,
and this is where, the point I'm making
the point
here
is a valid one.
You've got to give the background of that. You've got to say this is based on ABCD.
But
the other.
Eric, you're now thank you. Please carry on.
Because now you're now saying what he's saying. So
yes.
Continue.
Carry on. Yes. Carry on.
It's important to give context. When you see the news, it always gives context. So you and that's
not always.
That is what.
That's my point. Not always.
No. Never speak in absolutes.
My point is it always gives you context. Otherwise, it will only leave you with the point of, Kionjori has been sacked and that's it. Where you see the 2022 coming in is with the journalists actually infusing context. What is the context? When you see that headline, has Uhuru just sacked Ruto's 2022 running mate, is giving context on what is this that happened.
This information,
what is it
which was
because it's combining a number of things.
Back, it actually goes on up to page 8 of this paper.
12, page 12.
Well, the main context is 8. 12, yes, there's issues of it. Uhuru pays back father's debt, blah, 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 after 12 years and so forth.
He gives the youth plum jobs.
Yeah. The point I'm trying to make is, here you have a situation where the details that I speak of have been provided over 12 pages. Now, this is the anomaly. Usually, it's a
big
headline.
Event. It's a big event, CT. I'm trying to explain. You know why? Because it's so in the big event.
I'm a little slow this morning. Explain it again and speak slowly.
What the president did yesterday, he made a number of moves with that one statement. First of all, he addressed the concerns of farmers. He addressed the concerns of not farmers, just farmers in Mount Kenya, but farmers on various sectors. Tea. We're talking about milk. We're talking about coffee, rice, and bananas. He addressed their concerns. Second, he addressed the concerns of the youth. Third, he addressed the concerns of the political issues, the BBI. And he said, BBI, for me, this is what BBI stands for. This is what I see BBI as, and this is how I'd like to see BBI moving forward. He addressed all those issues. And then he said, this is what I want to focus on in this first quarter of the year. And for me to achieve that, to realize that, I decided to rearrange the government. And he announced the kind of rearrangements that he has made with his government. Now, when you try to analyze all those things, it'll take many pages. If it was just a one-off event, for example, the speculation that the DP had gone to Mombasa and he did not find the keys to a new house, you put that on as just one page or just one column. This is what would happen. But it will still go ahead and give you, there's the intro bit which tells you this is what has happened. And then from that point, you start explaining the backgrounders. The backgrounders are giving you the context. Where is this coming from? What's the relevance of this? Why is this news? This is what happens.
For instance, why do you think, for instance, in this country, people who politicians who have a tendency of speaking in the most foul language and using the most foul insinuations you could think of. Why, for instance, do you think they capture our headlines? There was a time where this issue of hate speech, and it toned down somewhat. but not completely. It didn't kill it. We still have people who seek populism through their utterances, which are adverse at best.
Right.
And yet, now, there are people who love it.
No, there's an element of sensationalism that is involved there. Because,
but why is it that this is something that has taken center stage in our politics? And it hasn't gone down, really. It's just metamorphosized a little bit. But why has it taken center stage? I mean, the utterances you read and you wonder, gosh, it's in print, you're reading it. Now, again, there is a history behind that, and why the permissiveness has also taken center stage, why certain things are allowed or even encouraged, and why politicians who represent that perspective have even become popular. There is a reason behind it. Now, if like me, you don't particularly like it, I would find cause to say, this is actually showing the lowest possible point of communication for a class of people who refer to themselves as politicians. That would be my opening statement. And I would say, and I would give my reason as to why. Now, the argument I was putting across, I would say, where the alternate realism comes in is that it will be reported as this has been said by so-and-so at this meeting, and that is it. And yet, if I were to look at it, for instance, like the comments that Babu Owino made about the venerable leader who seemed to have criticized Uhuru tremendously, I would have said, again, it looks like populism. And there are people who thought, this handshake is working well. I didn't think that was a good sign of the handshake.
No.
The lady offered her opinion. She didn't insult the president. She simply stated what she thought about the president and what he has done or not done. That's all she said. Strong words, but that's all she said. Now, I brought in the argument of what perhaps is actually happening and why that is possible. Why I say possible? There was a time such a statement would not have been possible in that part of the world.
You couldn't utter
you would
it at
not
all.
get away with such a speech about the president and hold on to that seat or retain your populism. Now, I'm saying the understanding of what has transpired to the point where these things become acceptable. As an example, that, my friend, is what offers that alternate realism that I'm talking about.
The conversation continues. It's 29 minutes to 10 o'clock. Seti Muga is raising the issue and he is actually attacking it as political journalism and saying it's offering alternate reality in the country. Do you agree? Do you not agree? We'll be opening up the phone line. We will be opening the phone lines shortly. 0719 012 600. Let's first take a look at what's happening on the roads and then I'll continue this conversation. Good morning.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM. Traffic. Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah.
You're listening to Spice FM.
All right, focus, folks. Everybody's still wondering why we still have a standstill on Langata Road. I guess more traffic than we anticipated today, but nothing in terms of an incident just yet. But we do know that Ngong Kiserian Road is under construction, and that has caused some traffic in that area. Quite terrible, according to what we are getting so far. Everything else seems to be okay, apart from what we see as crazy on Waiaki Way heading to town. But after that, it is quite smooth. So right now, everybody's where they wanted to get to a while ago. Little places where there's still traffic will be eased off in a short while. We don't expect anything crazier than that until later in the day, of course. We'll let you know if there's anything that we do see about that you need to know about. But for now, be safe, arrive alive. Spice FM KE is how you can reach us on Twitter. And if you need to call in, it's 0719 012 600.
Spice up your life. mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Well, of course, looking at then what could be, I think definitely giving background and context to what we see is important, especially when people, just having conversations and you hear that people are not then sure, where is all of this coming from? Is one question that pops up. Where is all this coming from? And having an understanding of what could be the backstory of all of this. And I think it is, in some cases, yes, important to give context or to give an understanding of what could be happening in the background concerning especially what happens politically. But then, of course, looking at the temperature that we see now, whether it's individuals who feel slighted, whether it's individuals who want to position themselves, we have individuals who've spoken in a manner in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, who have been mute or who've not been politically vocal previously. And obviously, without an understanding of what has been happening in the background, it's very difficult then to decipher what somebody could possibly be talking about. Some of the things that we've heard, some of the things that we've seen, you never expected them to come out of these people, but it's clear that they're doing it for a particular reason. Now, understanding that reason, then I think is important.
Understanding that reason
interestingly enough, for those who would support them too, to understand that actually this individual is speaking to us. This individual is speaking to us and making their position known, or at least making their desires known to us, or to say that there are certain sentiments that they want us to understand, and this is why they're speaking in this manner. I think it is because by the time you're reporting the story, you want to give some history to it.
But Eric actually answered that question by asking me a very pertinent question when I spoke of circulation. If indeed it was common knowledge how it is you determine circulation, and thereby knowing this determination, you understood what each newspaper circulation was, and if that knowledge was common knowledge, the issue that it wouldn't even the discussion would have been moot, because it would be clear what the discussion is. But again, it is how often is it explained, and how often do people get to understand how it is that these things are supposed to be understood. Look, there is this perception, for instance, in it. Let me begin. I'm going back into history. When NDP joined KANU, there was a perception among many people that this is it. Okay, fine. Raila Odinga has lost it. He actually is joining Moi. All right, this is it. Again, the discussion around it was vigorous. It was energetic. What then happened was, he didn't only join the party, but he becomes the general secretary or secretary general of the party. But the very thing that was predicted without very much explanation didn't happen. People gave reasons and said, given this history, he was detained, this happened. Then we moved a little forward. And then it was suggested, this thing that they're talking about, there's this Kibaki guy, these Luos are not going to vote for this Kikuyu. It happened.
Yes, they did.
The unspeakable. Now, I read many articles that tried to explain it, but in my opinion, there should have been discussions about it as to why it was possible, why it wasn't possible. We had a lot of why it was not possible. In fact, we believed that why it wasn't possible, and why this would be possible again, because immediately after that it was then believed, and what followed consequently, it was believed, well, that was a one-off. It was unlikely. Then
to happen again.
Yes, then it was unlikely that a Kalenjin and a Kikuyu could actually lead the country at the same time. A lot of discussion around it. But the alternate information was just that this has happened, people have understood, now we have a handshake. There's a lot that needs to be explained as to why these possibilities exist. And I'll give a reason why. For instance, this country has a history of dialogue. And one of the things that this country has, and has been shown by presidential leaders in this country, is that whenever things get to a really thick position, they talk. And they call those who are in opposition and have dialogue with them. Dialogue has actually taken center stage in a lot of what we have done in this country. This handshake was dialogue. This BBI is now further dialogue. All right? Now, all I'm saying is that sometimes it doesn't harm if an explanation as to why these things happen the way they do. In the absence of that, you're providing an alternate universe of information.
I think we'll be surprised, even with the BBI itself. A lot of people feel that it's just a political tool, purely a political tool. But if you look at the history behind it, it was at the point where this country was rifting. there was a huge rift. People were talking of cessation. There was no cohesion. There was conflict. There was no peace. So at that point is when they said, Ross, we need to sit down and have a conversation about what is going on, and let's see how we can put this country back together. To understand the history of it, I think, was very important. There are a lot of people who still feel they don't understand where this BBI thing came from in the first place. This thing now that is being forced down our throats. Where did it all come from? Why do they understand
because
it?
Because information has not been provided.
No, it could be
really.
No.
Eric's question is valid.
Listen, I'm saying don't understand where it came from. I didn't say understand the BBI itself.
No, yeah, where it came from.
All started.
Yes.
In terms of why was it brought about. For them, it's just a political tool. Okay, somebody wants to use something to put themselves back into government without understanding that where this country was coming from, something like that was needed to be put in place.
Somebody not understanding something is not because there is an absence of an explanation to it.
In some cases, yes, but you can't put a blanket statement on it like that. Unfortunately,
it's not always because of absence of explanation. It's not that.
Exactly, not always.
Yes,
so we're saying
always.
The same thing.
And in this particular case, when you talk about, for example, the BBI and the handshake and the reason behind it and the background for it, it's not for lack of information on that. This has been covered extensively. In fact, if one event has been covered as extensively as any, it's this one.
Which
there
one?
has been the handshake and the BBI, the reason behind it, what happened, what led to it, how did it occur. It's been covered extensively. In terms of even speculating how did the president and the former prime minister get into contact with one another? Who did they use to speak before they met on this particular day? Even the president himself has come to explain how they met, how they sat. This has been covered extensively. What I'm trying to say is, you see, when information is being shared, when news is actually being covered out there, there's so many angles to it. There's many angles. There's what is you are told today, then there's the background that will be given as the news unfold. That's why we talk about this is an unfolding story, and as news unfold, more perspectives come to light, and those more perspectives are covered as well. We talk about the reporting the first time, and then there's the second day journalism. It happens. There's the analysis. Eric, if you look at the publications, they have pages for analysis. If you look at radio and TV stations, they have pages for analysis. In fact, they have interview sessions where they'll call in Babu Owino and ask him, so what is this that you're saying? Why would you use such kind of words on a fellow leader? Why would you say this kind? Do you understand the law? Do you understand where we come from? Do you understand the impact of what you're trying to say? This is done regularly, on a regular.
Eric, it is true what you say, but let me just explain it perhaps a little more. If you provide information, but it isn't suited to the understanding of your listener, that information may not be very useful.
What is being suited to the understanding of the listener?
Thank you very much. This is where now vernacular, for instance, radio comes in. When somebody hears or gets to understand or listen to information that is delivered in a language that they're familiar with and that they can relate to, because it provides the nuances to the information which perhaps something that is written may not always provide well. Not very long ago, we were discussing science journalism, and I spoke about how training was important so that the information that the scientists understand is actually delivered in a manner that a reader who is not a scientist can actually understand what it is.
Exactly.
Again, the politicians will understand their politics, but the reader doesn't understand the politics, not necessarily the way the politician understands it. And you can spread this particular notion that I'm saying to any field of endeavor, any discipline. It has to be broken down so
into bite-sized pieces.
Dissemination of information is conducted by people who are actually trained to look at information and break it down and disseminate it to audiences, different audiences, right? And you understand your audience. So if you know that this is my audience, this is the audience that consumes my media, you know what language to use. You know to what extent you want to break it down. You want to dumb it down completely, or do you want to talk to us at a certain level of understanding? You already know that. This is the training. This is who you are as a communicator, right? So you're saying if your audience does not understand what you're saying, then the communication has failed.
It has actually.
It's true. That's the entire essence of communication. If you have said something and your audience has not understood it, then communication has failed, all right? But when you're talking about political communication and the kind of political rhetoric or coverage that you see, it's always been broken down. It's always
Eric,
dumped
you see,
down. It's always reported from that
communication-
angle of this is what Ruto has said, and then there's a background to what Ruto has
Communication
said.
is
This is what
incomplete.
Kipchumba has said. This is what Mwangi Kionjori
Yes.
has said, and then we go back to the other
Yes,
side.
Communication is incomplete when
without
the
the
other
feedback.
party
Yes.
has not given feedback.
It-
You know
there
this.
has to be feedback.
Yes.
There has to be feedback.
And the feedback that we get, and why I'm bringing this thing up, is how people respond and how they react. And how it is that from the longest time, certain views have been held by the public, and yet you will tell me this has been written, this has been said, this has been spoken. And I'm saying, but if there is no change, then it means that communication failed. Because if it succeeded, then the reactions would have been.
There's another
different.
reality city called perceptions. All right, perceptions are formed by and are influenced by very many other things. For example, you, in your kind of understanding, you look at another person and think their perception of this is totally wrong, and you may start saying, "Oh, you know, it's because
I never say wrong. I say skewed.
Skewed."
Yes.
So their perception of this is skewed, and you may look at it and think it's because of what they've been told or because of how they've been told, and yet you've consumed the same information and your understanding of it was different.
That's human nature by virtue
Exactly.
of the fact. By virtue of the fact that you're a
exactly.
human
Eric,
being.
your point is extremely valid, and I think it helps validate what I'm trying to say. If you ask, let me give live examples. For instance, there are people who hold the view that Raila Odinga is not electable in Central Kenya. Central Kenya cannot vote for him. It's a perspective that is held, and I don't think it's entirely true.
Yeah, we also don't know how many people hold that perspective. Just because you think that there are people who hold that perspective doesn't mean that it's right. It's correct.
No. This is the moral
It is
issue of
not
right
that
or wrong.
it's not reality that there are people who hold. Just because Siti Muga thinks that there are people who hold that perception.
Come on, Eric. You can't say that just because Siti
What?
said there are people. Where do you think he lives in isolation?
Yes.
Obviously, he has
He
conversations
clearly
with
is
people.
living in isolation.
No.
He has
You think that
conversations
there-
with people who
you
say that.
think there
and
are
they don't.
people who actually don't understand. You think that there would be somebody who would
Eric,
say
why
something
this
or give
vigorous-
some
that-
kind
why
of
this
feedback
vigorous
that they don't
opposition to the
understand?
statement?
That
When I
is
began the
is
statement-
that is what
people-
CT is saying.
No, but
that there
I
are people
didn't-
who don't understand. There are people whose understanding will be, oh, Raila Odinga is unelectable in Central Kenya.
Yes, there are
Based on-
people who hold
There are
that view.
people who
It's
hold
even
that
been
view.
written.
It's
been
It's not,
reported.
you know, everything I'm talking about is not my view.
Individuals
It's
who-
what has been reported.
Individuals who hold that view for whatever reason, for very many reasons. It's not
But-
because of
but
what
Eric-
they've
And
consumed.
some of those could
Eric,
be
it's
true.
not necessarily
Eric,
because of the
relax, just calm
coverage.
down. Don't
Eric,
get so
you know-
passionate about this.
no,
Relax.
Eric, you're stepping.
Just calm down.
Look, your foot is on the pedal, and it seems to be going towards the end of the pedal. Remember, I began this statement by giving a little history. I talked about 2020 without referring to 2020. I talked about 2007 without referring to it, 2013 without referring to 2013. And I'm simply offering another example of how it is certain things are reported and they're not entirely true. That's what I am saying. You seem to be saying that I'm saying it is true. I'm saying no, it is not entirely true. It's a perspective, and that's why it forms that alternate world that I'm speaking of.
Yes, and it's exactly the same thing I'm saying, right? Reporting is actually covered in different perspectives. So yes, one article here you might find an opinion piece, because I don't think there's any headline that will say Central Kenya will never vote for Raila Odinga. No. One article somewhere that was written by a columnist called C.T. Muga may have expressed his opinion that, you know what, I don't think Central Kenya can actually vote for Raila Odinga. That does not mean that that is the coverage that Raila Odinga has received. That doesn't mean that. It means that all angles have been covered. There are those that has been covered.
If
there are
an
those that
opinion-
also give an example of, when, this is how they've collaborated. Jaramogi collaborated with Jomo Kenyatta, with Raila Odinga collaborated with Mwai Kibaki. This has been covered several times as well.
All right. Let me talk about something.
And looking at the number of votes that Raila Odinga, for example, has gotten in Central Kenya, has that been covered? Has it not been covered? All those
This
aspects,
Raila
all
Odinga
those
story,
It really
It's
pokes
a
something here.
No,
This
no,
bear that is coming out, Eric.
It seems
problem
to be what he's raising this morning. Covering it all up with the issue of political journalism.
Why didn't you become like this when he brought up other examples, Eric?
Which other examples?
All these other examples.
I
He
gave
didn't prick
the
you like
example
this.
of Uhuru and Ruto. I gave the example of Kibaki and Raila. There were no issues, and then I bring this example,
Eric,
and all of a sudden, the gates of hell seem to be opening up.
So we go the same
Yes.
way. The example of the other leaders, and I've given you the example of Jaramogi and Kenyatta.
But
is
Eric,
that a Raila issue? No, Jaramogi is not Raila.
But Eric, it's not the examples that are the issue. It's your reaction to the example.
It's you who's seeing my reaction and choosing to take the personal side of it.
Am I seeing this alone?
Eric, I've even told you to calm down.
You two
From
are
where
seeing,
I'm sitting,
you two are seeing a perception
All
of it
right, let's talk about something less emotive, like say the reference to this paper, with reference to Kinjuri. They talked about old hands, and some say that his star is fading. Now, that is alternate reporting in this sense. In politics, things don't quite work that way. It may dim for now, it may even appear to dim, but this man is a politician. He's been in politics for 25 years. This may just be a bump on the road, not an end. Anything can happen and things can change. Now, to me, that is the reality of politics.
That's the truth. The truth is that you hold a different perspective. You have a different opinion on this. So because somebody else's opinion does not go with yours, does that mean that theirs is wrong?
But, I have actually not throughout my entire discussion brought in any morality into it. It isn't right or wrong. It is alternative perspective. Remember, alternative perspective.
That's yours is the real perspective.
No.
And theirs is alternative.
I'm discussing alternate perspectives as presented in the media, and I was saying that is what a lot of political reporting is. It doesn't take into account the many things that ought to be taken into account. That's really all I was saying. Yes, that was my point of discussion. I will give another example, all right? I am going to give a quote that is in the Standard again that the President Uhuru gave. He said, political power pursued for its own sake will not make us the great nation we want to become. If we use politics as a means to a greater end, it will give politics meaning, and this is my intent for this year. It's a quote. He has stated it. Now, you can extrapolate it and say, all right, so whatever address that, whatever reporting you gave to the nation is summarized in this particular statement. You feel, this is what I'm trying to tell you folks, that this is my outlook, this is what I'm trying to achieve.
2020, this is what we're doing.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. And then we look at the details of what has happened and we can say, okay, how exactly does it represent this? Now, that's discourse. Okay. Now, it is reported. At what point does it become alternate reality? When we remove, say, the political element even from that statement, the president is a politician. And an alternate perspective would be there's a political end that he wants to achieve. Not necessarily development, just political end. But it's now a discussion point. Now, that's what the media does. It provides these things. It provides an avenue for opening up that sort of space and that sort of discussion. Now, when you open it up and that discussion takes place, then the realism that ought to be there now begins to exist. But if it isn't, it doesn't.
It doesn't exist.
Yes.
It's 9 minutes to 10 o'clock. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We're going to take one or two phone calls. 0719 012600. That's 0719 012600. And also, we're looking at your comments on Facebook, Spice FM KE, at Spice FM KE on Twitter. Good morning.
Spice FM, Nakuru. Online, mobile, and on radio. This is Spice FM. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
So the story on page 5 that you quoted, CT. Old hands back as Kinjuri star fades. Is there alternative reality there?
Yes. If your star fades, it means it's dimming. And it's dimming because, one, it is assumed that it was a light or a blaze because of the position you had. So if you don't have it, then
you're done.
Yes, the star that illuminated that position at that particular moment doesn't exist. So, of course, it will fade. But the alternate story would have been many politicians have been in this position and they've bounced back to even greater positions and greater heights. And you could give examples. People who've probably resigned from positions and later come back and held bigger positions. There are things you can say about it. Now, that perspective is what I was saying, removes it from that alternate reality to a reality. That one says, yeah, it's happened, this is what can happen.
Yes.
Yes. It can't be that you're in politics for 25 years and
then suddenly, because now
this
position
one
was
event,
removed from you, then suddenly you're done, or your star has faded.
On that city, we agreed a long time ago, and we said, yes, that this happens, and that's why you have all these, columns that come up. You have all these analytical pieces that are then written. But on a story like this, you don't expect that this story will have to cover all those things in the same story.
It can point to. It doesn't have to discuss it in detail. You can, in a statement, say that this in politics is not necessarily the end. It's a statement. That's it. Then the analysts can come in and do whatever they do best and give those historical examples and psychological examples and social examples, whatever it is they feel will bring the point home.
Let's pick this call. This is Ray in Mombasa. Good morning, Ray.
Hi, morning. How are you?
We're fine, thanks.
Good. So I just wanted to maybe challenge the team that's on radio today. Let me first explain. I am someone from the middle class society. I'm someone who's learned, but I'll be very honest with you. I haven't read through the BBI, not very interested, because again, I think I side with Eric on this, saying we're not really sure where it's come from. We are getting information that has been disseminated to us and positioned for us in the way that we should be able to consume it.
Oh, Eric thinks the opposite, actually. Eric believes that the information has been given and that it's been disseminated. You should be able to understand it by now, based on what Eric has said.
Not the content. You'll understand the context where BBI has come from. Do you know why there was a handshake, Ray?
Yes, that I understand.
That's what I was saying.
Of course. Yes, but I think what we're wondering is now where this whole BBI conversation has come from. Is there a need for it? Is it for the people, or is it for political and interest? Because if it is for the people, I don't even understand what the rush is for. If it's about Kenyans, then allow Kenyans time to be able to get the document, to consume it, have some sensitization, town halls, so people can ask their questions. And people can understand how it will affect every individual, including the Mama Mboga, the billionaire who, the Kenyan billionaire who might not, worry about it because he feels he's not going to be affected. But allow everybody to get time to consume it. We rush in this country. We rush, especially when it's politically motivated. But at the end of the day, you look at what's going on in the country and you're like, it's us who get affected. It's every individual who gets affected. It's not those people who are in their jets or in helicopters, flying around. Yeah. It's us guys. So for us, why don't they give us time to be able to look at the document and say, okay, how does this affect us? Do we want it? Is it necessary in this time? Is it necessary for us to spend that amount of money on some of these events when we're not even sure what the event is about? So for me, I think I challenge the media to be able to take that document, decipher it, break it down into granular and layman's language that people can understand, all the way to the vernacular radio stations and the print media, so that people understand it, and to request the government to give it time. If it is indeed is for us, then we don't rush
it. There we go.
Point made. Not rush. Point made, Ray. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have
a good day.
Thank you. All right, you too. Thanks.
City, your reaction to that?
Well, this is good. She has
cemented 2 points.
Yep, she's chimed right into the very thing that I was saying, because her question, everything she said is valid, absolutely valid. And that's what I was saying should come out as a result of our media efforts in presenting things in writing and talking about it. Somebody else brings in a discourse such as the one that we've had. Now, that is what now presents reality. Because she even gave us a demographic, says, I belong to this strata.
Right.
And I actually genuinely will not read this. I won't have an interest. It is good. I would have taken the opportunity to ask, but there must be a reason why she doesn't take an interest. It's not as though she woke up one morning and decided not to. It can't be that throughout her life she has never taken an interest in such matters. Or maybe she has, for all we know. Now, those are the questions I would ask to get further clarity.
Right.
Yes.
So as we come to the end of the show, where let's talk about what we've, conclude on what we have discussed this morning. Yours on the issue of media and maybe other guest who's coming. CT?
Our guest was actually very clear. didn't mince his words, didn't seem to want to backtrack or soft pedal on the things he was saying, I found him an excellent guest, and we should find time to invite him again. Yes, maybe when some of the things he was talking about have gone beyond the level of percolating, and it's actually now bubbling.
He'll come back.
He should come back, yes.
Indeed.
Right, it's interesting to see how this country will move forward in whatever way with the most recent shuffle. Of course, it's very important to note that we should take the side of development for this country and say, look, political appointments aside, moving this country forward is what should take center stage in all things.
Thank you very much for tuning in this morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Of course, join us again tomorrow. We'll be here with more topics to discuss, more guests to bring into the studio to give us more perspectives on what we're discussing. And then I want to tell you about Monique, who'll be joining you from 3 to 7. She has a session on her show called Dear Monique, where, somebody gets into, sends her a message of concern, and she brings it up to the show, and people discuss and people offer perspectives. Yesterday, Dear Monique was, my husband of 10 years has zero financial discipline. How can I help? So that's what the audience was actually contributing to and helping the person who had written to Monique. Dear Monique is one of those segments that come up on the Spice Drive between 3 o'clock and 7 p.m. With Monique. And then, of course, from 7 to 10, you have the adults in the room. Yesterday, they had a pastor from the LGBTQ community.
Aye.
Yeah, aye. Yeah.